Good morning and welcome to your Board of County Commissioners meeting for October 28, 2003. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Father, when we are overwhelmed, grant us your peace, Father. Bring us closer to you and grant us strength to face the future. In your name we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome again. We have a very, very special guest this morning. They were the loudest doing the pledge this morning. I could hear them over everyone else. This is the physical education class of Ms. McClenny and Ms. Scotto from Lawnwood Elementary School. And y'all have something for us this morning? All right. Well, let's get to it.
Before they come up, can we just test to make sure our music is working?
Sure.
I just want to test the volume.
It's electric!
Okay. Just real quickly, during this education class, we teach the boys and girls line dancing. And line dancing in itself presents a lot of challenges. First off, a mental challenge of most of the time children say, "Ooh, I don't want to dance. Ugh, I don't want to do that." But once they get over that challenge, everything's pretty easy. The next thing is that they have to learn the pattern of the steps. So line dancing is a pattern dance. It's not a free form that they can just do whatever they want. So they have to commit the pattern to memory, much like learning the multiplication tables. Concentrate, focus, learn the pattern, and once they learn it, they've got it. After they get the pattern with their feet, then they have to let their body feel the timing so that they can stay to the beat of the music, not going too fast or too slow. Once they've got the pattern figured out, then they have to learn how to synchronize themselves with the other students, because they're all doing the same thing at the same time. Because this, like I said, is not a free-form dance. So there are a number of challenges that they have to go through in order to get to the point that they are now. And this group of young students who are selected from fourth grade have practiced several times together, but not a whole lot together. So their synchronization should be almost perfect, but we can't predict everything. We did end up with another challenge, and that was the carpet and the location. Tennis shoes don't fly as easily on carpet as they do on the court that we have. So you may see a few feet stick once in a while. And our positioning is not what we had planned, so we may have to adjust on that. But anyway, right now I'd just like to have all of you stand up. You face the audience, just give everybody your name and aloud. Okay, let's get boys, one over this way. The other one, girls. Two in the middle. Doesn't stay. Doesn't stay. Tie your shoes. Check your shoelaces. Not quite the way to practice it, but go with it anyway.
You can see it. It's electric. You gotta feel it. It's electric. Ooh, it's shocking. It's electric. Yeah, she's a boogie of the time. She's a boogie of the time. She's got the boogie. You can know it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. And you can hold it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. But you know it's there. Here, there, and everywhere. I've got to move. I'm going on a party ride. I've got to groove, groove, groove. From this music I just can't hide. I am with you. Come, let me take you on a party ride. And I'll teach you, teach you, teach you. I'll teach you the electric ride. Some say it's a mystic. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. You can't resist it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. You can do without it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. Boogie up, motherfucker, she's a boogie up. Don't wanna lose it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. But you can't use it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. But you know it's there. Here, there, and everywhere. I've got to move. Come, let me take you on a party ride. And I'll teach you, teach you, teach you. I'll teach you the electric slide. Boogie, boogie, boogie. You can see it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. You gotta feel it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. Ooh, it's shocking. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. Boogie up, it's a big, 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 she's a boogie up. You gotta know it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. And you can hold it. It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. But you know it's there. Here, there, and the boys start rocking, there's a beat that you just can't lose. Where it's gonna take us, nobody knows. It sure feels good to the body and soul. I love the slide of the steel guitar. I love the moan of the no blues song. I love the shake of a tambourine. I love the bass when it's low at me. So put on your shouting shoes and turn it loose. Turn it loose. You feel like you're dancing and you just can't stay in your seat. Your knees start knocking and you can't help stomping your feet. Before you even know it, you'll be singing along. Makes me wanna stay here all night long. I love the slide of the steel guitar. I love the moan of the no blues heart. I love the shake of a tambourine. I love the bass when it's low at me. So put on your shouting shoes and turn it loose. Turn it loose. Slide of the steel guitar. I love the moan of the no blues heart. I love the shake of a tambourine. I love the bass when it's low at me. So put on your shouting shoes and turn it loose. Turn it loose. Turn it loose. Everybody pull on your shouting shoes and turn it loose. Grab your shouting shoes.
Okay, the next one is called the Boot Scoot Boogie. And don't run over everybody on this one now, because this one takes a little bit of space. Shamik, okay, why don't you stand back that way, Shamik? Okay.
Out in the country past the city limit sign where there's a honky-tonk near the county line. The joint starts jumping every night when the sun goes down.
Thank you so much to the Lawnwood Elementary School physical ed class.
Ashley?
We're going to change pace a little bit and ask Mr. Bob Davis, our tax collector, to show his version of Boot, Scoot, and Boogie. Mr. Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I need to take that class. I never could get that electric slide down. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, other members of the board. As you know, my annual budget is completely funded by user fees from collecting taxes, registering vehicles, selling hunting and fishing licenses, and other services we provide. Each year, any excess revenue that our office earns is distributed back to the taxing authorities on a pro rata basis within 30 days of the end of the year, after September 30th. And I'm pleased to report to the board that we had another fabulous collection year. Our total excess revenue for 2002-2003 totaled $2,029,141.87, approximately a 16% increase over the prior year. The board share of that is almost 80%, or $1,603,000. $764.87, and I'm here to present that check to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Sheriff, you got a check for us? Or is ours in the mail?
Don't look at me in that same tone. Well,
Can you beat the check the last guy gave us?
no, I can't. I wish I could. Before I address last fiscal year, let me go back to a year ago in which we closed out the 2000-2001 fiscal year, in which we gave back $75,581.76 in interest earnings. That was done exactly 1 year ago. In addition, we had, at that same time, approximately $200,000 in operational savings, which this board approved to come back to me, and we did purchase 10 new patrol vehicles, which are currently serving in our fleet. And now to this past fiscal year, which we, as Bob Davis stated, just closed our books. As everyone here is aware, this past fiscal year has been very challenging in regard to interest earnings. However, I've been very committed to using our tax dollars at the best possible way we can. And through our investment program, I am very proud to present to you $53,850.75, and this is only an interest earned for last fiscal year on taxpayers' dollars, which was forwarded to the Sheriff's Office. In addition, we had some factors that I could not address last fiscal year, which we are all aware of, such as workers' comp and insurance costs and other things that affect our payroll and staff. Things that we could address were food costs in our jail, which after rebidding and renegotiating our food contract, we went from a cost of 96 cents per meal per inmate to 85 cents per meal per inmate. That saved us approximately $2,100 a week in our food service costs in our jail.
We also got some recognition for our cuisine out there, didn't we?
Yes, we do, and that's hanging in my office. Should I dare state what that was?
Sure, you can let everybody know.
We have the worst food in the Treasure Coast in all of our jails. See, so that's a good thing. Also last year, we were instrumental in a couple of things that occurred within our community. The first one was bringing the Florida Law Enforcement Information Officers Conference here to the Treasure Coast, which you did the invocation, not the invocation, but the introduction to. In addition, we played a key coordinating part with the Law Enforcement Olympics that were brought here to the Treasure Coast, all of which had a direct financial impact to our community. If you remember, last fiscal year I budgeted $269,000 for contingency cost. Because of the increase in our jail population as well as the renegotiated cost of our health care to those inmates, we absorbed a $250,000 increase last fiscal year due to our medical cost. In addition, the county had an upgrade in security at our jail, in which required overtime as well as regular time cost for that security. We're estimating, we don't have the final numbers as of today, but we're estimating that came out to about a $150,000 cost, which again we absorbed. Homeland Security mandated certain things which we absorbed the cost of. One thing that the Homeland Security Office did do for the taxpayers of St. Lucie County is they gave all of our first responders level C suits, and that was done at no cost to our office or taxpayers. At this time, I'm proud to report that at the end of fiscal year 2002, because we do more with less, because we do it more effectively and efficiently than ever before, I'm proud to present an additional check in the amount of $55,779.99, which represents operational savings. Both checks total $109,630.74, which, as of this date, is the highest I've ever given back to the board. I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just so everyone doesn't think we're flush, sometimes money burns a hole in people's pockets. But Mr. Davis presented us this morning, a large portion of that money goes into the fine and forfeiture and the general fund budget. Actually, out of the $1.6 million, $935,000 goes into those two budgets. Yeah, and we did budget $600,000, so it did come in $335,000 greater than budget, but a large portion of that goes into fine and forfeiture, which is the budget we're always juggling. We're always trying to keep that balance. That's what I call the touch-and-go budget. In addition to that, the money that the sheriff just presented us with this morning, over $100,000, also goes into the fine and forfeiture budget. And that is the budget that is being affected by Article 5, Revision 7, as you recall.
Would you explain the terms fine and forfeiture?
Fine and forfeiture budget is really not a good name for this budget. This is the budget that funds the court system, the jail, and the sheriff's office, and the clerk of the court's office. And of that total budget, and it's a large budget, it's, Marie, what's the total of that budget? Anyway, of that budget, it's about a $60 million budget. Of that total $60 million budget, only $2 million actually comes from fines. The majority of that budget comes from the fine and forfeiture millage rate, the actual property tax rate on the homes and businesses in our community. And like I said, Article 5, Revision 7, which was approved by the voters, which is taking the money that normally comes to the county, it's now being transferred. A lot of the revenue is being transferred to the state, and the state is to fund the operation of the court system. That's how it's supposed to work. However, at this point, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and it's supposed to go into effect July 1. So keeping that in mind, we're trying to salt money away, not knowing where we're going into the fine and forfeiture budget to just see how this all shakes out. So we're going very conservative.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Head Start Awareness, but the kids aren't here yet. That's a wonderful presentation, and we'll get to that when they get here. We need to back up. I've been reminded that I did pass over the minutes, so if you've had a chance to look over the minutes of October 21st, do you have a motion or correction?
Motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay. Ayes have it unanimously. We'll move now to reading of the announcements by Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There will be a public hearing this afternoon at 1 p.m. in these chambers regarding the Treasure Coast Tractor Services and Treasure Coast Land Clearing. The meeting changes for the month of November. The November 4th, 2003 Board of County Commissioners meeting will begin at 6 p.m. The Board of County Commissioners meeting for November 11th has been canceled due to Veterans Day. The November 18th Board of County Commissioners meeting will be at 9 a.m., and that's the annual reorganization. And then the November 25th Board of County Commissioners meeting is going to be at 7 p.m. instead of 9 a.m. The Board of County Commissioners are going to hold a workshop on November 12th at 2 p.m. in Conference Room 3 to discuss airport issues and fixed base operator development at the airport. The Arts and Public Places dedication ceremony will be held on November 3rd at 1:30 p.m. at Riverwalk Park, east of the Manatee Observation and Education Center. The Board of County Commissioners, the City of Fort Pierce, and the Fort Pierce Utility Authority will hold a joint conflict resolution meeting on November 12, 2003 at 9 a.m. in these commission chambers. The Board of County Commissioners will hold a workshop on November 24th at 2 p.m. in these commission chambers to discuss Lakewood Park stormwater issues. The Board of County Commissioners will hold a public meeting on November 24th at 6 p.m. in these commission chambers to discuss the urban services boundary. The annual UDT SEAL muster will be held on November 8, 2003 at 11 a.m. at the UDT SEAL Museum on North Hutchinson Island. The annual Party in the Park will be held on November 8, 2003 from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. at the Fort Pierce Inlet State Park. This event is sponsored by the Conservation Alliance of St. Lucie County, the Savannah's Reserve Endowment, and the Fort Pierce Inlet State Park. This year's theme is Awareness, Education, Protection. The United States Navy Band Country Current, a 5-member string ensemble, will perform a free concert on November 15, 2003 at 3 p.m. at the Astor Summerlin parking lot adjacent to the Historical Museum. And there will be free shuttle transportation from the Lawnwood Sports Complex to the concert from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Also, Mr. Chair, I believe that on Friday, November 7th at 1:30 p.m. is going to be the groundbreaking of the 10 Mile Creek Regional Attenuation Facility. That's not on our list, but I just wanted to make that announcement. That concludes the announcement.
Do we know that for sure? Is that a tentative?
That's
a
for sure.
definite date?
That's a definite date.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's been a long time coming.
Yes.
Other than the Taylor Creek restoration, that's about the longest project we've been working on.
They're about tied, yes.
Okay. All right. We have general public comment next. Keep in mind we don't have any public hearings scheduled for today, but we certainly welcome your comments on any of these items. 6A, B, and C, which is the first one is development off of Weatherby Road called Key West Bay. A member of the public is asked to speak on that after, I guess, staff has introduced it. Also, there are a couple of reserve items, 6B and C, PGA Reserve. So what we're going to do is allow some public comment on that after staff has had a chance to introduce the item and go through it. Even though they're not scheduled for public hearing. So the point of this is if you want to comment on those three, 6A, B, and C, you're welcome to comment now, but you can also hold your comment until those items are brought before the board. Any other item, please come forward and just tell us your name, speak directly into the microphone so you'll be heard, and tell us what's on your mind. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Tom Robb.
I think you're a tall guy. Just why don't you aim that as high as you can, but you could need to get a little closer to be heard.
All right. My name is Tom Robb. I'm Vice President of Sand Dollar Shores Condominium Association on Hutchinson Island. I just have a few comments about your land swap proposal of Herman's Bay. Now, Herman's Bay is a beautiful beach. It has nice sand underneath the water. People come there and they go fishing. Now, from what I understand, the swap is north of that, and that water is full of limestone. So you're not considering an apples-to-apples swap. It's you have a nice beach in Herman's Bay. You have a lot of people that come there, and then if you move it just 50 yards north of that, you're going to have a beach that's unswimmable. That's all I have to say. Just
Thank you, and I appreciate you
aware of it.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. That's number 7, and we're having a public hearing on November 25th. And would you please take this gentleman's suggestions and go investigate?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And also, you know, you might want integrate that into the public hearing as well.
Yes, sir. Actually, Mr. Chairman, if the board if this is acceptable to the board, what we'd like to do is we did get an email with a similar comment yesterday. We'd like to pull this item, if that's okay, for at least a week for us to go out and take a look at it, and then rather than just advertise it, we'd like to do a more detailed site investigation and then come back to the board if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Mr. Chair, just so you know, we've had staff out there yesterday, a couple times yesterday. It was rough. It was hard to really see what was going on. We had people out there again this morning. We're going to send some lifeguards out there and thoroughly investigate this before we make any decision.
Great. We appreciate that. We appreciate your comments. Yes, sir.
Charles Grandy, Hutchison Island. We really appreciate your reaction to the situation at Herman's Bay. The only thing that I would suggest is try to get the lifeguards out there at low tide so they can get a real good impression of the difference between the two beaches. The swap may or may not be a good idea, but that input should go into the decision. I'd also like to recognize the Fire Board Commissioners and the Port St. Lucie City Council who worked out a compromise agreement over the CRA funding. The city doesn't get everything that they wanted, but they certainly are getting everything that they needed. And the Fire Board didn't get everything that they wanted, but they were also getting everything that they needed. And I guess that's the hallmark of a good compromise. The reason I bring that up today is I think it's important that we all try to impress on the city of Fort Pierce that they should be embracing the same agreement, which would give them a full 4 years to replace the fire and EMS contribution with tax increment funding from such new developments as Harbor Isles, Marina Bay, and Beach Estates. I'd also like to point out that the Fort Pierce CRA would be receiving an incredible amount of incremental tax income, far more than they get today from the Fire Board, if the major owner of the undeveloped port property would agree with the port master plan unanimously adopted by the county and the city of Fort Pierce, and work with the county to promote the mega yacht development and implementation plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to address the board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Bill Cannell. I live at 8420 Muirfield Way in the Reserve. And I know, Mr. Chairman, we're going to discuss two items from the Reserve later in the agenda. There is another item in the Reserve which I talked about on October 7th before you in the public comment period, and I'd be happy to hold that again until a general discussion, but I'm not sure if that's going to be part of the report. With your permission, though,
does it relate to these two items?
I'm not sure where the report gets to. If it covers the Saddlebrook connection,
Briefly, yes.
briefly, then that will open up that channel then for me to address. Mr. Chairman, if I might, I've watched this process now for some period of time, and I'd like to make a couple general comments about the process, if I might, the general process of how things get decided. I think we would all agree that the county has ethical and moral obligation to keep its residents informed fully on major things, particularly major things dealing with a large number of residents. And I know the Sunshine Law applies to at certain levels and doesn't apply to certain levels of your planning and staff work process. As I understand the process, the developer meets with staff. And then staff, actually, as we heard last night, your staff meets with city staff and talks about plans. And then you have the development review process with the developer. And it's not until plans are finalized and actually have a stamp on them saying, we recommend this to the Planning and Zoning Board, does the public ever get a chance to have any comment? And I think there's something inherently wrong with this process, and I would ask if in the future going forward, if we couldn't try to change that. Everybody's getting played off against each other here. We all get surprised. You get surprised. You might even be surprised today of the suddenness by which some things are on your agenda. But to manage the process better, if we could set up a system maybe so that, and I would give the developer his right to have private meetings with your staff. But after those private meetings are held, doesn't it make some sense maybe that the staff reach out to a large group of constituents and invite them into that process at that point, rather than waiting till it bubbles all the way up to the Planning and Zoning Board, when in a lot of cases it's too late at that point, and you end up in a Donnybrook. And it'd be great to avoid any future Donnybrooks. And I would just request that the Commission instruct the staff to call representatives of large constituent groups during the planning process to keep them informed. And yes, even to schedule meetings with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and I don't really know how to respond to that. Government's not perfect. I don't know if we can make it perfect. We can try, but we can certainly investigate that, but I don't know how to make that happen, really. That's really why we have a planning and zoning, so the plan is presented to the public, and they have a chance to comment on it before it even gets to us. We're the decision makers. Planning and zoning is not. Really don't know how to automatically include members of the public before that, but we can certainly take suggestions. And if you have any suggestions, please bring them to us. Anybody else?
Commissioner Hutchinson, did you have a comment on that?
Well, kind of.
Sorry,
Mr.
Jeff.
Chairman, Dennis, do you not still hand out those papers that we used to get put out at the homeowners association meetings once a month, property and homeowners meeting? That kind of puts everybody on alert if there's something pending in the status of any developments coming through or rezonings and so forth?
Commissioner Hutchinson, we put out our project update reports on a weekly basis, and they're supposed to be going on the web on a weekly basis as well too for updates. I think the word's getting up,
but would that help address the concern?
No, I don't think so. I think what we were looking at was more of a active, interactive, participatory type function that is currently not in our structure to do. Our Development Review Committee meetings are open to the public. Anyone is welcome to come in and attend them. They're held on a weekly basis based upon whatever project is going through, whatever cycle at the moment.
Do we advertise which projects are appearing before that committee?
Just the simple notification internal in the building, that's about it.
But I mean, is that on the website?
No. Other than on the project list. On the project list, it identifies when the next DRC meeting is scheduled for and when comments are due and that kind of thing. But I gather that we're looking for a little bit more proactive neighborhood involvement. To do that, yeah, if you want us to go and do that, we can go and do that, but it would require some either specific board direction and legislative structural change to our codes, or just some specific policy direction on the part of the board to go and do that. It can be done, but it's just going to, I just need some instructions in which to go and do.
Mr. Chairman, just one other comment. Mr. Murphy, do we not encourage any developers coming in to contact their surrounding neighborhoods?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I think we're getting close to a solution, though, and I think it is the Development Review Committee, because some of these major site plans don't have to go to P&Z, and others don't even have to go to this board. I think the minor site plans. So I think the process is in place. The suggestion, I think, was excellent. We just simply need to find a way to plug in the community into the process. And I think the Development Review Committee, which are public meetings, all we need to do is have some type of a notification process. Most of these larger groups have homeowners associations. Simply notification to that homeowners group that there's a DRC and a project pending within your vicinity, giving them a heads up that if they're interested in attending, they may. I don't think it's that complicated. I think we just need to build in that extra step of notifying the public when a development project's in their neighborhood.
Do we just notify the homeowner association? Because not everyone's a member of the homeowners. Every homeowner association is different. So we notify by mail, individuals,
No.
newspaper. I'm trying to figure out how, and we can't treat one, we can't treat one area of the county differently than the other. We got to have a process that'll apply to all, and I don't know how to do that. Because, as you know, not everybody's a member of the homeowners organization, or even some of them don't like their own homeowner organization. So I don't know how to do it. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I seem to recall that was a question that was brought up while I was sitting with the property and homeowners group. And exactly what you're saying, who do you notify? To say, it's the homeowners association in the neighborhood doesn't really cover it sometimes. I hate to rely on the website, but is there some way we could put topics on the website? How far in advance is the development review set up? For instance, if you know it's going to be next week, could we put that on the website? Could we, if it's set up a month in advance, could we include it on the project list? There's got to be some kind of neutral way of putting it out there so that anyone can access it, because if we start picking and choosing who we're going to notify, we're going to get caught somewhere.
The projects are put on our update list. I'd have to go back and look to see exactly how our website is constructed. If we have like a upcoming events kind of thing, there may be some things that we can do to get a higher level of alertness on that. We are dependent, of course, on the web as to that, and of course to the standard notices, which unfortunately aren't usually picked up.
And there's nothing wrong with notifying the homeowners associations as well. It's just that they don't always.
We're not going to solve this at this particular time today, but why don't we come back to something with you in a week or so and give you an idea of how it may be best to come in and address what you're asking for.
Sounds good to me. Anybody have any ideas? We can feed them in as well. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Bob Bangert, representing the Conservation Lands. I'm questioning items A, B, and C under Public Works in the consent agenda. I'd appreciate understanding why the subdivisions Manatee, Ranchettes, Postobolo, and Raptor 2 should be exempted from the Land Development Code requiring an environmental impact study on these areas. I sent an email to the Public Works but failed to get a reply. I'd appreciate knowing what the reason for the exemption is. Thank you.
I think they're all old groves with no habitat at all. Is that correct?
I'm looking over to Environmental Resources, and they're acknowledging yes.
Yeah, the purpose of that is okay. Thank you, Seth. Yes, sir.
My name is Carl Ravasi. I wasn't going to speak at this particular point, but since you're having trouble, it fits in with the problems that I see we're having with this particular subject with the community development. Several weeks ago when we were here, we took a look at this project as well as several other projects in the reserve. And it was decided at this meeting that there would be a study made by the Development Department about setting up a workshop. And the workshop was going to be there to discuss this particular project. So what I don't understand is, if we weren't alert and took a look at the newspaper and the agenda, we wouldn't even know this was on the agenda today. And I object to that. So it's not just a casual mistake or misstatement. Someplace this staff that you have working for you has taken it upon themselves to go ahead to this without going through the procedure they agreed to several weeks ago. And I don't understand how they can do that. So I'd like to ask the Commission to delay the hearing on the lakes till a future time, till after the workshop is held. Thank you.
It's a pleasure of the board on that. I don't remember voting specifically to hold a workshop, but we may have. Did we direct staff to hold a workshop on one or more items related to this issue?
There was discussion at the board meeting of a couple of weeks ago, and I forget the exact date, where we were going to go back in and address in either a workshop or some other forum in front of the board the transportation conditions and transportation issues associated with the reserve. That is agenda item 6C that's on the discussion today. Due to calendar restrictions and calendar constraints, we don't have any other available dates other than this particular board meeting, and that's about it till the end of the year in which to come in and present this information out. Now, I apologize if there was a breakdown in communication. We did try to make some contacts. They didn't happen. I know I attempted to make a few contacts. That didn't happen. I'm not going to go there now. We don't need to go there. Point is that if the board is desirous of reviewing the traffic conditions relative to the reserve, this today is really the only opportunity we're going to have for some period of time. And then the other item that was associated with that was parcel 34. And when we move into the discussion item, although it's a B and a C sequence, 34 ahead of the transportation discussion, our objective is to go through and talk about all these points at once and see where we're going with this, addressing the issues of the Saddlebrook Drive connection, which was mentioned earlier, addressing the issues of the parcel 34 connection, which were discussed a couple of weeks ago, and keeping in mind that the City of Port St. Lucie has approved a final development order as of last night for development activities immediately adjacent to and south of the PGA Reserve portion of the project, which is the unincorporated county part. And if there are things that the county wishes to address in that order, there are time constraints that we have to deal with in that regard as well. So it gets complicated quickly, and we just run out of time.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I actually share Mr. Ravasi's concerns there because on October 7th, this board did ask for additional information about the regional transportation network that connects the existing reserve with the proposed DRI to the south. And the concern we had is that we were seeing one individual site plan come in with a very unclear notation that apparently was one of the large linkages between the unincorporated county and the city. And we had asked that we understand, get all the information, have all the options laid out in front of us about where those connections should be before we're asked to approve one individual component of that. So my understanding was that the board direction was to have that broader discussion before this item comes back for a vote. And to see it back on the agenda today, in advance of the discussion of the regional transportation network, I think is counter to what this board has asked for. And I think it's also a little unfair to the public who had been assured that we'd have that broader discussion before being asked to approve a specific site plan or plat. I can either hold off on the remainder of those comments until this item comes up. Would you prefer that since this is a hearing, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I don't want to hear. In other words, we ought to try and have a debate, one debate, not a debate today and a debate over this a month or 2 months from now.
Mr. Chairman?
So we probably ought to find out up here on the board after comments what we're going to do rather than listen to it twice and try and make one decision. We ought to listen to it once and make one decision. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. What is that time frame, Mr. Murphy?
The time frame that I'm concerned with, besides our regular meeting, finding available time on that one, the time frame that I'm concerned with is if there is anything that is in the Reserve PGA Villages, which is the project in the city of Port St. Lucie, if there is anything in that development order that the board has a concern over, because of the city's actions, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong on my timelines, I believe we only have 30 days after their official action in which to file an objection or do something in that regard. If that timeline is off, then it's longer, then we're okay. But if we only have 30 days in which to do something and to consider something, that means that we have to act by the end of November 25th meeting, which is our next regular meeting, in which to take any actions, and that's 2 days before Thanksgiving. So my concern is strictly time in terms of if there is anything that the county wishes to do, and we're flat out of meeting dates in November.
Mr. Chairman, question for staff. How long have you, as a staff person, been dealing with this project?
Personally?
Right.
Since it walked in the door 20 years ago.
And how long in that discussion, how long is that?
20 years.
20 years.
No, I mean this specific proposal, the new DRI in Port St. Lucie to the south of the existing reserve.
Oh, I don't know. When was it filed? About 18 months ago?
Okay, so a year and a half we've had this project on the radar screen. And at this stage, have we ever had a discussion presented to this board about where the regional road connections will be between this city and the unincorporated county?
The regional road connections, no. And that's
any direct connections into the reserve?
The internal connections?
Right.
No.
Okay, so we've had no discussions on this board about this topic. In the year and a half this project has been on the radar screen. Now the approval has taken place in Port St. Lucie, and you're telling us that we've got to scurry after the fact to provide comments in a 30-day window. That's what doesn't make sense to me. This is an issue that we should have been coordinating with the city, because I think the project that Coulter's working on is beneficial not only to Port St. Lucie but the county, but we need to do it in a fashion where we're coordinating our efforts. To have this go through the city and then at the tail end we find out what the impacts are to our residents in the unincorporated county makes no sense to me. I think this board should have been involved in the discussion about where the best location for those roadways are to allow the project to move forward without detrimentally affecting existing residents. And that's why I'm discouraged by the way this process has unfolded. And I think we can do a better job than this.
Okay, so how elaborate a study do we need? That's what I mean, if we just get a general...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean...
No, I mean, if we just need a general overview, put up the maps, maybe some traffic counts, projected traffic counts, we don't need to do a prolonged study with consultants and that type of thing.
Precisely.
Well, then why don't we just schedule 2 hours to address the whole thing and ask the developer to hold off on this particular subdivision? Well, I'm sure we can get the 3, 4, 5 of us together for 2 hours between now and the 25th.
If I can just make one final comment on this, what they're asking for today is a plat approval for a site plan that's within the existing DRI that's already been approved. As a part of that plat is a little component that apparently denotes the connection to the south. If
could I comment, because I want to make it clear as to what's going on with the 2 items on the agenda. The first item, 6B, is the final plat approval, and that's for parcels 34A through E. It does have at the very southern end of the plat a little tract. It's called Tract C, and it doesn't show any roadway connection. What it says, I believe, is that it's reserved to the developer for future development purposes. Or, Dennis, maybe if you could read the exact language so I don't make a misrepresentation.
Mr. Chairman, what Mr. Sepo is referencing is on the face of the plat for the lakes at PGA Village. Note number 5 reads, Tract C, as shown hereon, is hereby dedicated to Reserve Homes Limited LP for future development purposes and maintenance purposes, and shall be the perpetual maintenance obligation of said association. The Board of County Commissioners of St. Lucie County, Florida, shall bear no responsibility, duty, or liability regarding such common areas. The last sentence is standard language. The first part of it indicates that it's just being reserved and retained by the Reserve Homes Limited LP for future development purposes and maintenance purposes.
So what I was going to ask was that this particular plat does not show a connection between this plat and the newly approved DRI. We understand as developer that to make that connection, we would have to come back to this board. And so what we're asking in item 6B is that this plat, which has site plan approval and which actually greatly reduces the land use intensity in those areas, we're asking that that plat be approved so we can move forward with the construction. But we clearly understand that to make any connection between that plat and the new DRI, we would have to come back to this board. So I would ask that the board at least vote on the plat taken that way, with our commitment that we have to come back for the connection. And, and further, we would be happy to participate in a workshop session.
But we're doing exactly what we decided not to do, and that is hear it all under public comment. We're not even on that issue yet. We haven't even put it up on the screen yet. Mr. Coward, I mean, what is your desire at this point?
Just to finish, that was exactly what I was suggesting. I have no problem with the plat being approved as long as the connection itself is removed, because the plat itself is fully consistent with the development order in the existing DRI. I have no problems with that. Okay. The problem is the connection that's on this map now although it doesn't say it's a connection, staff has interpreted it as such, as has the developer, and they're even saying we approved it, even though we didn't even understand it to be a connection because it doesn't say that. So if there's a clear note on here that says that is not a connection, I have no problem with this plat being approved. I want to have the broader discussion before we make the connections. That's all I'm asking.
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
so we will hear the debate then today. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, in all fairness, can we kind of go back to the public comment on the other issues? Because, I mean, that's already listed on the agenda, and I think that's
okay.
unfair.
That's a good idea. We're not going to continue it then.
Okay.
I don't hear a consensus to do that. We will hear it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the board? And keep in mind, all those items on the reserve will be addressed when that item comes up, and you'll be allowed to comment. Mr. Rivasi, you'll be allowed to comment when it comes up. Well, come on up if you have another item you want to discuss.
You know, most of us who are here from the reserve attended this meeting last night at the Port St. Lucie Council meeting. And what I wanted to say is it was very clear that they only approved up to the northern border of the city acquisition. It had nothing to do with the traffic or the connecting roads. And I just want to clarify your minds on that. There's no doubt in their mind. In fact, the mayor even said, what are we doing discussing things that are in the county? Because that got a little confusing at that meeting last night. But there's no confusion. The city only approved that DRI up to the current acquisition or annexation of the road, of the property north of the canal. But you can't approve that thing, in my opinion, if you don't have that connection. If you don't have those connections, then it's an entirely different animal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the board before we move on to the items that are scheduled? Seeing no one, we'll close the general public comment. We do have a consent agenda in which several items are placed that hopefully don't have a lot of controversy to them, a lot of housekeeping items. Does anybody wish to pull any of these items, though, before we vote on them for separate discussion or vote?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question again on 4A, B, and C, and it's mostly in regard to drainage. And I know all three parcels back up onto canals under different jurisdictions. Are we getting letters on file that they have, that each water district has agreed to any drainage concerns? That I think Fort Pierce Farms, North St. Lucie River District, they've reviewed these also.
These projects are still undergoing review, so prior to their final presentation, we'll have all the appropriate agency notices, sign-offs, whatever we need to get.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is a follow-up to Commissioner Hutchinson's questions about the problems we've had in similar ranchette developments. It's the Australian pines along the drainage ways that the owners have asked us to go remove at public expense. When these are coming in as at this stage, do we require the developer to actually do the removal of exotic species so that we don't have to, the public at large doesn't have to assume that cost?
Not if it's not on his property, no. We can't.
If it is on their property, though, they're
If it is
required.
on their property, they are required to remove any exotics that may be present on the property as part of the development of it, yes.
So we are doing a review to make sure that's done?
I'm presuming that's done through environmental reviews, but yes, I'm fairly confident.
Double check that, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question on item 6B, the Ravenswood Pool. I have been asked, is there a time frame on that?
For the record, Linda Brown, Parks and Recreation. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lewis. Yes, at this time, we after this is awarded, we anticipate probably 30 days for the contract to be signed and the process work, and then we will begin, the actual process. Patty Raffensperger may know the times that we're closing down the pool. Is Patty here?
That's more what I was looking at. I was asked how long the pool was going to be out of commission.
Good morning. We've been told that it's going to take approximately 2 months to get the permits for this, so we are anticipating after the first of the year to close the pool for work.
Do we have any idea how long it's going to be closed?
We've been told approximately 2 months to do the work.
Okay, so you're saying close it around the first of the year and then it'll probably be open sometime in March.
I would speculate maybe towards late January and then 2 months to do the work.
Okay, thank you.
Any other item? Do we have additions? Yes, we do have one addition to the consent agenda as well. Any other discussion on consent items?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further discussion, I'd move approval of the consent agenda with the addition.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. We will move now to 6A, which is development on Weatherby Road, and the staff recommendation is to approve it. Who's taking this item?
I have that one, Mr. Chairman. Hank Flores of the county staff. This agenda item is the petition of Greg Wexler through his agent Henry Kay for a major site plan approval for the 77-unit residential project to be known as Key West Bay, located on 10 acres of property on the south side of Weatherby Road between South US 1 and Oleander Avenue. Subject property is owned residential multiple family, 11 dwelling units per acre, and has a net density of 7.9 units an acre. The Land Development Code identifies the minimum standards of review for all proposed site plans. These standards must be met in order for any site plan to be considered for approval. Staff has reviewed the request for major site plan approval utilizing these requirements. The applicant has provided a transportation impact report that indicates that the 77-unit project can be expected to create an additional 497 daily trips to the roadway network. The applicant's transportation engineer believes that an acceptable level of service will be maintained and that no signalization on South US Highway Number 1 or turn lanes will be required for the project. The applicant has also indicated that the Florida Department of Transportation has plans for signalization at this intersection. Staff is recommending as a condition of approval that any road impact fee credits granted to the project through the dedication of 10 feet of additional right-of-way on the north side of Weatherby Road to be directed to this improvement. The proposed project is in the Fort Pierce Utilities Authority service area, and the FPUA has confirmed that they will be able to provide services to the site. The site proposed for development consists of approximately 8.5 acres of pine flatwoods, half acre of temperate hardwoods such as cabbage palms, laurel oaks, and water oaks, and 1 acre of Australian pines. Approximately 8.5 acres of the total site is proposed to be impacted with development. The proposed project has been modified from the original plan submitted to minimize the tree mitigation requirements. The original plan was apparently developed without considering the significant pine trees on site. The applicant also had South Florida Water Management District approval prior to submission to the county. The modification eliminated 4 buildings from the center of the property in order to preserve 1.44 acres of trees in that area. The proposed solution placed the preserved trees towards the center of the site, but does not provide for an enhanced perimeter for the project, which could provide a buffer to the proposed H&N Oaks public park to the south of the proposed residential use. If the locations of the trees had been considered earlier in the process, greater opportunities for buffering surrounding properties would have been possible. In order to ensure that the most amount of trees are preserved as possible, staff is recommending that the developer provide a form of acceptable security in amount sufficient to cover the cost of any tree mitigation. The developer will then be required to coordinate with the Environmental Resource Division for the mitigation of the loss of trees on site. Any native trees remaining on site between 2.5 inches diameter at breast height and 12 inches DBH shall be counted to satisfy these mitigation requirements. A field meeting with county staff will be held to verify the quantity of trees proposed for preservation. Any remaining mitigation will be accounted for with on-site tree installation. When the maximum viable tree planting density of the site has been reached, the developer will satisfy any remaining mitigation by planting off-site on public lands in St. Lucie County or by contributing $200 per inch DBH of trees removed to the county tree planting fund. Staff is recommending that these actions be taken before the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. We have also included this as a condition of approval. The applicant's environmental impact report indicates that there are 2 active gopher tortoise burrows on site. The applicant proposes to relocate these tortoises to the preserve area, which can accommodate up to 4 gopher tortoises. The applicant has indicated that if, during the construction phase of the project, the coordination of the prescribed burn and construction schedules conflicts, the developer reserves the right to obtain an incidental take permit from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Staff finds this action unacceptable and has included a condition to the resolution to prohibit an incidental take. Staff has reviewed the request for major site plan approval and determined that it has met the minimum technical requirements of the Land Development Code and the minimum intent of the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff has reservations concerning the project's design concept as portrayed on the site plan, but as stated, finds that it meets the county's minimum technical requirements. Draft Resolution 03230, if approved, would grant the request for major site plan approval, subject to 12 limiting conditions.
Thank you, sir. From my review of the documents, it looks to me like you just got tired of dealing with the developer, and this whole development started out backwards without any reference to the existing trees on site, which is not the way we ask our developers to plan things. We ask for an assessment of the existing natural conditions, and then you work around them. Here we have, I think you have something like $800,000 set for tree mitigation. The first item, the first goal is to avoid clearing your native habitat, not to destroy it and then replace it. But anyway, does anybody else have any comments before we open up with the developer, I guess? And we have agreed to allow the public to make some comments. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, please, Mr. Chairman, Board, my name is Henry Kay, and I'm an attorney representing Wexler Development. First, I want to say that the name Key West Development, Key West Bay, is just a working title, and we don't intend to go forward with that name. Second, I would like to say that, and address your concerns. I believe that we have worked closely with the planning department, with your staff, and it's been both very educational, instructive, and beneficial to my client to do that. So we've enjoyed working with Mr. Murphy, Mr. Stevenson, Mr. Flores, and Mr. Kelly, all of whom have had direct input into the methodology which was finally arrived at for this final site plan. We also worked closely with environmental, with Ms. Bessie and with Ms. Mott to work out a plan which was environmentally healthy and suitable for this particular area. And we believe that the site plan that we're presenting does that, because the perimeter area did not have the greatest concentration of trees. In fact, the greatest concentration of trees, according to the survey that we had and which we were working from, was in the center of the development. And so that's specifically why the developer consented to remove 28 units from the initial proposed plan and to make the entire center of the development a preservation area, which will preserve intact all of the foliage, scrub, and so forth, other than minor areas which are necessary for the retention ponds required by South Florida Water Management. We believe that the plan that has been submitted, even though Commissioner Barnes, your comments are well taken, we may have started perhaps on the wrong foot, but we believe that now we're on the right track, and that this plan is going to be beneficial for this community. The residence is planned will provide residence for your expanded workforce in St. Lucie County. The developer has agreed and consented to each and every one of the conditions having to do with the tree mitigation and all of the other conditions for this approval. And while I recognize that it's difficult to wrestle with an issue about tree removal and mitigation, I can assure you that we intend for both on-site and off-site planting. And it is also believed that by the time we are ready for the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, that a resurvey of this area will show that there will be additional counted trees on the property in addition to those. And I don't believe that the $800,000 figure is a correct figure. I spoke with Mr. Stevenson, Mr. Flores. I believe it's much less than that in terms of the overall mitigation. It will not be that many trees that will be removed from the property. And as indicated in the staff report and in the proposed resolution, this will be more than compensated either financially through the mitigation process, which is embedded in your code, or through off-site planting, which we are looking at right now. So, and I also would like to comment that this particular property, I'm sure that you all as county commissioners have passed the property. I don't know that you've actually been out to the site, but it is not the surrounding area and so forth. We believe that the development that we propose will enhance the property overall, will provide a central preserve area, and will be beneficial to the county. And we are in concurrence 100% with all of the areas addressed by your both environmental and by the planning department. And we ask that, that the resolution be passed 100% as proposed by your planning department. I have with me the developer, Mr. Wexler, and the engineer, Mr. Moya, as well as Mr. Sapotnik, who is handling the environmental management of the property. If the chairman or the board have any concerns that they wish to address to these gentlemen, we'd be happy to comply. Or if you have any questions to me, I'll try to respond.
Thank you, sir. I know there's going to be a few comments from the public, so you may want to stand by for those.
Thank you.
Thank you. We did agree to take some public comment. Does anybody wish to address the board on this item?
My name is Hubbard Beach. I live at 1012 Sager Avenue in White City. I'm here to address the concerns on the burning of the property for clearing the vegetation. I have been told, after I request to speak now, that an agreement has come about that the developer does not have to burn. I would like to ask
Mr. Chairman.
county staff if that is true in effect.
Mr. Chairman, David Kelly, Planning Manager. I'm not sure that we referenced the memo that you also received with two supplemental conditions, one of them requiring for trees that are damaged during construction to be mitigated at a ratio of 4:1, and the other one prohibiting controlled burning on the subject site. So those are recommended conditions, and I believe they were faxed to Mr. Kay, and I hope he was including them in his acceptance of all conditions. And with that, Mr. Beach, yes, there is a condition that prohibits burning on the site.
That's good. I appreciate staff revisiting that issue because many people in the area were quite concerned when we met with Mr. Wexler last week. And I'm sure he will verify Mr. Wexler agreed that he does not want burning and never did want burning. And I don't think staff should have tried to impose that on him at that particular time. However, I do appreciate you passing this resolution, approving it, and not allowing burning on site. Thank you.
Okay, were we talking about burning of debris or a control burn? A control burn to make the habitat healthy. As Mr. Beach, as you know, a lot of preserves that we purchase, if you're going to have them be native and remain native and be a healthy ecosystem, you have to burn. Fire is part of Florida's history, so we can't abandon all burning in the White City area with preserves that we own, South Florida owns, DEP owns. We're going to continue to do control burns because that also eliminates the fuel that builds up year after year after year, so that if you have a forest fire, it doesn't get completely out of hand and not only kill all the native trees, but destroy homes and businesses as well. So I hope we're not abandoning control burning, because that would... Are we doing that? Could we get some response to that? I don't...
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'm Vanessa Bessie, Environmental Resources Manager. For the record, no, sir, we're not abandoning controlled burns. They're a requirement of all the management plans that we have with FCT and our funding partners on our natural areas. Just in this particular area, they can accomplish the same thing as fire manually. They can go in and manually remove all of the fuel loads that are there. It's probably going to cost the applicant a lot more money to do it that way. And ecologically, fire is probably better, but he can get the same result doing it manually.
Okay.
But we did do a controlled burn at the Oxbow Eco Center last year, and we didn't get any complaints from White City, so we must have done it on the right day. The wind blew the right way for us. So.
Right.
And Mr. Chairman, with your clarification between control burning and debris, I'm not sure what Mr. Beach was speaking of, but there is no prohibition in here about burning debris, and that may only be a clarification or maybe something for consideration.
We have another member of the public that wishes to speak, I think.
My name is John Ferrick. I live at 4802 South 25th Street. I am speaking for the North Fork property owners. You have a letter that was drafted and sent to you. I won't go into that, but their main concern was this possible burning, as we have a lot of people that live around this particular project, and it would make it extremely difficult for these people to burn with the known people who have real major problems with smoke living just about completely around this property. Plus you have a congregate care facility just to the southwest of this property too. I also would like to state that the North Fork property owners do have no objection to this particular project. We think it will improve the properties along this corridor, and maybe the other properties along there will get improved in the process. I would like to thank Franny Hutchison for having the developer get with us, and so that we could get our 2 cents in and they could get theirs in, and we could get together and work out something. And I have one question that as at the meeting we went to last week that I'm a little bit curious about is the new plan. I've looked at the old one and the new one. They are required to have 2 entrances for the fire department, and I'm just wondering, this is a smaller project, and I'm just wondering, it was brought up at a past meeting, I won't say which project, that there was questions on a much larger project about the fire ingress and egress, fire department ingress and egress to a much larger project, and it was said that only one entrance was needed, and I think most of the people questioned that, but it was let go at that particular meeting. So I'm just making a statement on that. These people have done excuse me, everything that's been asked of them, and we have no problems with this project. Thank you.
Again, my name is Herbert Beach. To the commissioners, my intent and position is, along with others that were at that meeting, that there would be absolutely no burning of any description on this project. That includes controlled burning or burning of debris. Now, I did read a statement just briefly a while ago that burning would be prohibited. So if you have to itemize what is prohibited, please include debris as well as controlled burn. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like some additional information from our staff. The attorney representing this client said that he and his team have worked with the staff and basically taken staff's input and changed the plan, yet our staff's report says they have, quote, significant reservations. So I'd like to hear from our staff specifically what those reservations are and how you think the site plan could be done better.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Coward, David Kelly, Planning Manager again. I think you have before you on your screens a copy of the site plan, and the original plan that came in was essentially identical to this with a number of buildings. I'm sorry, Dennis, that's not legible, and I think they've got the same. It is up there, but I think the commissioners have the same thing I have. Okay. Essentially the same plan that's here, except for the elimination of 4 buildings in the center. At various meetings, staff identified significant trees within the site and provided specific recommendations to move items on the site to save specific trees. We came up fairly quickly with 300 or 400 inches of savings with what we considered were minor movements. They included things like straightening out those 2 curves in the parking lots, one on the east, one on the west. You can see those little bumps. I don't know where you're looking, but on each side there's a little curve in the parking lot. Modifications to those curves in those roadways would have saved a number of trees. We were simply told no changes would be made. The change that finally came about was, well, all right, we'll take out 4 buildings. That is a modification. It allowed the plan to meet the county's minimum standards. The very fact that the left side is effectively a mirror image of the right side would tell you that no significant consideration of the resource was made going in. Having said all that, the plan meets our minimum technical requirements.
Okay, could I also hear from our environmental director in regards to the most sensitive and critical habitats on site, because we do have comprehensive plan policies that try and direct the development that can occur to the areas that are not environmentally sensitive, or at least not as environmentally sensitive. So where are the areas on this property that the Environmental Division feels are most worthy of preservation?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coward, Vanessa Bessie, Environmental Resources Manager. That's the conundrum, if you will, that we were in with this particular site, because the entire site is pine flatwoods, which is some of the most beautiful pine flatwoods I've seen in this county in a long time. So the area to the south that borders up to the Ancient Oaks Park was probably the least desirable habitat. However, early on, we had asked them to increase the buffer between the development and the park to the south, and since there's no code requirement for them to do that, that was essentially brushed off, and it was never addressed again.
Is the south the bottom of the map we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's actually a very difficult question for me to answer, because the entire site is environmentally sensitive. This particular parcel was identified to be purchased through the SL program as Ancient Oaks Edition, and we weren't able to get the site.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Coward, if I could just jump back again, I think that was why staff didn't identify a particular area, but we did identify significant tree specimens throughout the parcel, and they were not given any consideration.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Actually, the area in the middle does have some significant trees in it as well, but it does not include those minor modifications that we asked the developer to make early on in the process. That would say that right now they're looking at tree mitigation of about 3,300 inches. So if you multiplied that by $200 an inch, the $800,000 bond that we're talking about isn't too far off.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up question on that. The minor modifications that staff was asking for, does that in any way, shape, or form reduce the number of units that would be built?
No, sir.
So they get the same development potential, they just do it in a more environmentally sensitive fashion?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have some questions. You have several statements here. The proposed project provides a minimum incorporation of the existing native upland habitat in open spaces and landscaping. You go on to say that there's little data to support that the area that's set aside contains the most viable habitat. Then you go on to say there's little effort by the applicant to identify the most appropriate areas of site for preservation. Then you go on to say the vegetative buffer is very minimal. They've provided, and then you talk about the public and semi-public conservation, recreation, the need to identify them, and there's a park to the south. I just, from hearing staff comment, having been here 11 years, I've never heard probably this much negative comment on a development, and it appears to me that there was a cookie-cutter development. The owner may not even have known what they had out there, or the developer, because the owner may be a different person. And there was very little attempt to take into consideration either the park site to the south or the existing native habitat. There's no doubt in my mind they could get the same amount of units in as we heard with the very little tweaking of the plan, but I'm not going to vote for this. I think it was done backwards, and the reason it's got so many problems is because it was done backwards to begin with. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
if I
ma'am.
could, Vanessa Bessie again. When this site originally came in, it came in without a tree survey. So they had not done a tree survey when they originally came in. We require them to do that. So they went and did it, and we're quite surprised at the number of inches of trees and the required mitigation. So you're absolutely right.
And then what about the drain, the piece in the middle, the set aside? Let's say they set it aside and they've affected the drainage flows, and they may either pine flatwoods or, if you flood them or deprive them of water that they're used to, they're going to die. So then you have a bunch of dead trees in the middle because somebody didn't plan for that. So it seems to me that they should do what they should have done to begin with, and that is plan something unique to this site, and you can probably sell it for 3 times what you're selling these units for if you preserve the attributes of the site. And they come before us without even squaring off the parking lots as you had asked. So I can't see us trying to fix the thing here, and I'm not going to vote for it the way it is. So anyway, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Moy with Mosby & Associates. We're the project engineer of record. Just to, I guess, how we started this project, we did have a tree survey performed, and we did meet with staff at the very preliminary stages. And we had...
You already had a site plan developed for the project, didn't you?
We had a preliminary site plan laid out, which we basically took the density of the project, laid it out to where we felt it met all the codes, and then met with staff to discuss if there was going to be any significant issues. This issue didn't arise with the trees. Later on, when we went through the final process where we were tweaking this thing to formalize it, one of the difficulties we had with the development was getting everything to work together, get the drainage to work to meet district requirements, getting specifically the separation between buildings. In order to save trees, you have to encourage clustering of development. The spacing between building requirement that we had to use to meet your code made that very difficult. And I tend to disagree a little bit with their statement to tweak some things here and there. We couldn't meet that setback requirement between buildings if we did that. In addition, to work around pine trees is extremely difficult if you have any kind of grading issues, any kind of obstruction issues. extremely difficult to have them maintain if you do any kind of disturbing around a pine tree. They're very sensitive. So we felt that by creating one large tract in the middle is far superior than to try to maintain some little pieces here and there. So that's why we said, okay, let's take the best part of the site, which is what we felt was the middle, and let's preserve that, leave it totally undisturbed, and that's the most viable solution, and that's how we came with the layout.
Yes, Chris Sapotnik with Environmental Services. I worked on the environmental preconditions on the project, got involved in the site planning and helped them with the preserve area. Mr. Moya kind of stole my thunder with the clustering of the trees. What I wanted to comment on is the property is pretty evenly distributed with pines. We tried to find the area that had the largest congregation of them that we could logically set aside a preserve area. This area happened to work out the best. There was, I guess, a discussion about whether or not we were coming in with the same density that we were looking at before, or could we get the same amount of units in. The density was actually decreased by removing units from that preserve area. So the applicant went from 110 units down to 77 units. So they actually did come down, reduce their units, and reduce their impacts on the site. And now they're setting aside a dedicated preserve area with a habitat management plan, taking tortoises from the periphery, locating them in that preserve. And then, excuse me, one thing that you probably have in your package, I'm not positive, but in our environmental assessment, we did identify the area of lesser habitat and lesser quality habitat. And there were on the periphery. The only area that is on the periphery of the project. On the west side, there's a clustering of Australian pines. Then on the south side, down in the southwest corner, there's another clustering of them. So overall, the property is pretty evenly distributed with flatwoods.
Australian pines.
Correct.
You're preserving them?
No,
oh.
That's where the housing's. That's where our. Okay. That's why if you look at the development plan that we've got, we've had most of the development along the periphery with the preserve directly in the center.
Well, I think the preserve is great. I agree. You can hardly ever preserve, or at least reliably, pine trees and medians and little islands and things like that. But the staff is telling us, though, that you could preserve a lot more trees if you just square off some things. And I would like to see some, either from staff or somebody independent, that the drainage plan is not going to kill everything in the middle. If we ask you to do this and approve it, and it dies, this whole thing in the middle, then there's a problem.
One comment I'd add to help you with that is that in a flatwoods community, it is dependent on rainfall primarily, and it'll be getting its rainfall. It's not the superficial flows in there aren't going to be detrimentally affected by what development they have, and they are having their ponds put alongside this in addition. So I don't see where drainage of that area is a big issue.
So you're saying it's not going to be drained off too quickly or flooded too extensively?
No.
I mean, I thought pine flatwoods would kind of needed the conditions they've had all along. I mean, one cluster of pines might get more water, but the problem is if you change what they're used to, they die, is what I understand. So I just want to make sure that whatever they're used to is pretty much what they're going to get. And I don't know if anybody's even talked about that.
It won't be a detrimental change that's going to affect the flatwoods in that area. And I don't know if staff concurs with that, but that's my opinion of it. And
I'm not sure I'm ready to give my opinion on that at this time.
Well, who could we go to? Who could we show this site plan to? Somebody from a biologist or botanist from South Florida or University of Florida? I mean, I would like for somebody to tell me, that this is, if we're going to give you the right to just preserve in the middle, which I think is a good idea, at least let's see that it could be viable, is all I'm saying.
We can certainly try to get with the biologists at University of Florida and have them take a look at it and see what we can come back with.
If I could, if I may, Bruce Moy again. The site is pretty much, I mean, it's flat. It's very flat. So the rainfall that each area of trees gets is basically whatever falls on that part of the site. It would maintain that flat condition, so I don't see anything that would be any kind of a major effect on the stormwater or whatever contributory areas it has now would pretty much remain in its existing condition and the post-development condition.
What about staff's comments, though, about straightening out some of these angles, because you can preserve, if you make a big enough space, you can preserve islands of maybe not individual pine trees, but if you cluster them by straightening out some of your lines.
We did discuss that when we were with staff, and their recommendation is in order to do that we would have to obtain some kind of a variance from the building setback criteria, because we can't get the buildings to fit and make that happen without not meeting your code on building setback distances.
Well, that's aggravating. Dennis, we've asked over and over the last few years to, when we have situations like this, to work with the developer to tweak our codes to provide for more protection.
And this is the poster child project for that exact discussion, and we did have those discussions regarding the possibility of applying for a variance to the building spacing formula, and we couldn't indicate blanket approval of it at staff level, but we indicated a very positive view if it came in and it was showing some true preservation. The applicants, for whatever reason, chose not to go that route.
All right, but between now and if we don't approve it today and we don't deny it today, but we ask for a little more time, you would have time to work with them to possibly come up with more protection and keep the same number of units.
If they're willing to do that.
And then we would be willing to recommend that, who does the variance go before? Board of Adjustment?
Go to the Board of Adjustment.
So staff would join with the developer and go there and explain why all of us need these variances.
Absolutely. That's what we indicated before, that if it made sense, we'd be right up there with them.
Okay. That answers my question.
If I may, regarding that building setback separation, as the whole plan, there's lots of codes that we have to comply with. Building separation, as well for preservation, is also based on fire separation requirements. And I don't think we were getting a favorable response on fire separation requirements if we make those buildings too close to one another. So that was another hurdle on top of trying to preserve trees that we were unsuccessful in overcoming.
Let's say this got put off for a month and you had more preserve areas or more, you would save money by not having to mitigate or pay into our fund, and you would come up with a better product because people like trees and your units would probably sell for more. So
yeah, Mr. Chairman, just on the fire code issue, the fire marshal's office was just speaking to me a few moments ago when the variance question first came up, and indicated there are ways to address fire issues, types of construction, and there are ways to get closer separation between the buildings. So the doors are available. The options are available. For whatever reason, they've been elected not to be pursued.
One more thing, if I could. Just to let you know how we got to this process, and I was a little bit puzzled, too, when I saw the staff report and saying that there were significant reservations. That word significant kind of stood out to me. I know there were some concerns about some tree issues on site, but where we really came with this preservation area, and it's not something that we can take full credit for. It came as a staff a recommendation. We worked diligently with Ms. Anna Smith there to come up with this. It was thought that this was a good thing for the area. It's something a little bit different that we're doing above and beyond the preservation of a habitat area versus single tree locations would really help and help compensate for some of these other issues that we're having with some of the setback. And that was my understanding, and I wasn't privy to all the meetings, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that's where we came up with that. And
I understand. And I didn't hear, for example, White City folks are pretty, they jealously guard their trees and their landscape. I didn't hear anybody stand up and say this is a terrible project. you know, we have a park next to you. We haven't said this is a terrible project. Sounds like it just needs some more work. So that's just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, in spite of staff comments about reservations, I just want to say that this developer has efforted to make this a pleasing project, and we would like approval to go forward. This process has been very, very lengthy for us. We've met all of the technical requirements. The tweaking that we're talking about could extend this project for months. In the development of this particular multifamily unit, it's recognized, and I spoke to Mr. Stevenson, who isn't here, but it's recognized that there will be additional growth, actually, of on-site trees during the process, and that the mitigation will probably go down, and that's why there was an amendment to the conditions for mitigation placed into the project. So we would like, there's also a full landscape plan, which you I think it's part of the package, but it's not up on the screen, but our landscaper is working closely also with environmental, and certainly I think that this commission recognizes that the homeowners adjacent as well as White City are in favor of this particular development, and I can assure you, and I'm sure you know, that from a business standpoint, the better that we do to make this environmentally enhanced and beautified, the better we'll do in renting the residences. This is a multifamily rental units, not sale units. So it's in our best interest to preserve as much of the natural beauty as we can as well, and we intend to do that, and I think that the developer has taken every step that we can take. Mr. Moya addressed that there were some technical issues that are outside of your purview. They deal with, the fire marshal's requirements. They deal with South Florida water management requirements, and we've had to cross many thresholds. The developer did not recognize when he came in to purchase this property and develop it that we would be a, quote, as Mr. Murphy indicated, poster child to test out the waters here, but we feel that we've met that test. The resolution that's proposed has sufficient conditions in it to assure this community that if trees are removed, they will either be replanted on-site or off-site or otherwise financially mitigated. There's a condition of sufficient security to assure that before the first building is allowed to be occupied, and we're respectfully requesting that you approve this. I think that the developer can meet all of the concerns that you yourself, Mr. Chairman, and the other board members have addressed, and we've attempted to do that. And you can't please everybody all of the time, but we've tried to please as many of the agencies and governmental units that we've had to deal with, as well as the surrounding residential communities. So we're asking approval, and we can assure you that we will continue to work with staff to do whatever is necessary to preserve the beauty that exists in this particular acreage.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a quick comment to make, and I had met with the developers 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, and I would personally like to thank them for taking up my suggestion meeting with the Homeowners Association. The other suggestion, though, that we had that day was if you would consider going back to, I believe it was with Ms. Bessie, our environmental department, and asking if there's ways we can better coexist next to the Ancient Oaks Park. Was that ever done, or to my knowledge, that part was not done?
We've discussed, and we intend to put trails that would make it some available for the public through the development. That isn't required to be part of the. It's not, I don't believe it would be technically required.
No, it's
to
not
be on the
technically
site
required.
plan. But you can. The developer has assured me that is their intent to make it. But we do. I want to balance this off, Madam Commissioner, with saying that we also will have to meet the security requirements for our tenants. So the issues of accessibility will be addressed in a way that will make the preserve accessible, but will not violate the security of our tenants that are paying to live there.
Ms. Bessie, where is the active part of the park going to go? Is it going to go directly adjacent to this, or will that be more passive?
Actually, ball fields are right behind them.
When you say behind them, what do you mean?
To the south, directly.
So there'll be ball fields just to the south of them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and do you know where we are along that process? That's probably not
We're
your
in
department.
permitting.
So we're permitting the
permitting
construction of the ball fields, and do we have to build retention areas for our ball fields and parking lot?
Yes, sir.
That's something that we work with another developer on 25th Street to share a retention area, and that's probably something we could work with to share a retention area, maybe even at no charge to you, and pick up a lot more mitigation or a lot more preservation.
Mr. Wexler has indicated the willingness of the developer to allow the park to tie into the sewer and water through our project. So that, I think that would be very helpful to the development of that park area to the south, because we recognize that that's going to be mutually beneficial.
Oh yeah, we're spending millions on that park, and you'll be able to, I'm sure, advertise that as an amenity.
Well, and we hope that you can advertise the preserve area and the beauty of our development as an amenity as well.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if I may, I would just like to request that the developer work with our office when they're putting these trails back in that area so that we can tie things in the right way to Ancient Oaks if that's what they intend to do.
Absolutely. A letter will go out, assuming if we have approval of the site plan, a letter will go out to Ms. Bessie today confirming this discussion that we had at the request of Commissioner Hutchison and her department about the trails and working with the environmental, with the county.
What are we looking at up there right now? Looks like a ink blot.
That's the landscape plan with all the trees 12 inches and greater marked.
It's a landscape plan or the inventory?
It's a landscape plan and a tree inventory, essentially.
Yeah, mine is washed out. Okay, well, I've certainly stated my opinion. We have 4 people up here, though, so I've heard comments and the developer, and let's move on to the next item after some action on this.
Mr. Chairman, I agree generally with what you've said. I don't think that going through our process backwards is an excuse for us to have to allow you to move forwards. Sorry for that, but that's really the best way I can summarize this. You came to us basically with a pre-designed plan, and then after the fact decided, because our staff indicated you needed to do a tree survey to find out what the environmental resources were on site, and have apparently been less than receptive to modifying the plan to try to incorporate those resources. I do think that you have made a significant improvement with the central preserve area, but when our staff collectively is saying that they have significant reservations about the plan before us and that there are minor modifications that could be made which would allow for you to get the remaining 77 units and still move forward with development in an environmentally sensitive fashion, that I think is the standard that we've tried to set for this community. We're trying to raise the bar, and if you look at other projects in St. Lucie County that have been approved in the last 5 years, I think you'll see the positive results that that's had. So this is not an attempt to stop your development. I think it's an attempt to improve it. So I, too, have some reservations about the current plan. There's some specific issues in here we haven't addressed, but in order to allow for this to move forward, you know, so it doesn't get raised at the next meeting, I'd rather it be raised now so we can address these issues. In order to deal with this $750,000 bond that ties in with the tree mitigation, hopefully that number will be reduced, but the staff recommendation is to have that prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, essentially at the end of the process. I'm wondering why we wouldn't put that at the beginning. In other words, tag it to the vegetation removal permit, as opposed to allowing for the removal to occur and not having that bond in place. I'm not suggesting they would, but they could potentially not continue the project, and then the removals occurred, but they never have to go to the CO, and no bond has been issued.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coward, I believe that the requirement was prior to the issuance of the first CO, the first building CO, but I see no problem in having it at the vegetation removal permit stage.
But you understand,
I understand.
The first CO is after the removal has occurred, the site work has occurred, the building has occurred, construction's done, and then you would have them put a bond up. That doesn't make any sense to me. It would be at the outset of the project when they need to begin the vegetation removal, where we'd have a bond in place for the mitigation of that removal. That would seem to be the most sensible way to handle that.
That's fine.
The second issue in regards to the conservation easement, do we typically have a developer dedicate the easement to the county when you have an internal preserve of this size? 1.44 acres. I thought it said the easement was to be provided to the county. Is that factual?
Yes, Commissioner Coward, that's factual. It's a comp plan requirement to require conservation easements over preserve areas. In the past, or on other developments rather, South Florida Water Management District has actually been named because they required some mitigation for impacts. So that met our comp plan requirement as well. But in this case, he doesn't have any impacts that require South Florida Water Management District
Let me just
mitigation.
get clarification. I understand the conservation easement. It's whom it goes to, why it needs to go to the county, as opposed to remaining a requirement of the developer to handle either through subsequent homeowner association or property management, whatever that may be.
Commissioner, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, it may be a form of art. The easement they were talking about would be in favor of the county, meaning that no one would have the ability to go in and modify that without the county's consent. That's the objective of this consent.
So it's not our responsibility to manage it. We just...
No, it would be the management responsibility of the property owners, but the idea is that there be a protection to prevent change to it.
Okay, that was what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in light of a lot of the comments from both the developers and the board members especially, I would hate to say to actually vote on this if it seems like it's going in a negative way. I would rather offer the developers the opportunity to go back and meet with staff. And so I don't know if being continued, since it's not really a public hearing, is the best way of doing this, or...
Dan, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a continuance would work if that was the board's desire on this.
A continuance or a tabling, either way.
And with that, continuance, I'd have to give a date, right?
Right. This is not a public hearing, as I understand it, Dennis.
Okay.
Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
How long could we, if we worked with them to get them through the variances, if they agreed to do that?
Well, variance process is going to take approximately 45 days from the day we get the final setup into it, just because of where our meeting schedules are. There may be another way to come in with a plan subject to obtaining a variance. And
Why can't, I mean, what we've been asking, though, for years is for y'all to be able to tweak our codes without going through all that nonsense. If you know that we can save acreage by simply moving buildings around and the fire department doesn't have any objection to it, then we ought to be able to do it at this level without sending it back through.
we have some limited authority. This would probably exceed whatever authority that I
But doesn't
have.
this
or
board have the authority?
not without changing our code.
Right, but the point is, we've asked repeatedly for suggestions about how we can improve our code to give that ability to you, so we don't have to make it complicated when the developer is trying to work with us to do the right thing. We've had this discussion for years, so I think that's the frustration. Come back to us with specific recommendations about how to improve our plan. That's what we're asking, Mr. Murphy.
Well,
let me. We're not done up here yet. So, I would like to see. There's no reason we should be building a retention pond for the park, and they cutting trees down to build a retention pond for their development when we could share a retention pond and probably make it look like a lake and benefit everybody rather than a big square ditch. I mean, these are things that we ought to be working with them with, and we might be able to do that as well.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry. It might be a matter of terminology. I don't know whether we call this a table rather than a continuance, if that makes it easier.
I don't think it matters, does it?
Well, I was just saying, my other comment, I too, listening to board comment and some of the issues that have been raised, I'm kind of concerned moving forward when there are items that are supposed to be here, such as trails, which I don't see. And I would like to kind of see the finished product. We're making suggestions for changes, and I don't know what's going to be done with those, so I too would like to see some of this finalized before we make a final decision.
Okay, the gentleman, you want us to move forward today, but I think you've heard that there's no consensus to do that. Do you have any other
well, if
comments?
there's no consensus, as persuasive as I may be,
No,
I
you're
think
not
I'm
that
up against
persuasive.
I think, let me just say this. The developer, I think, has come, I just want the commission to keep it in mind that the developer has come forward and tried to work with planning and with environmental. And in spite of what I am hearing from the planning department, they did suggest approval of this site plan. And if they hadn't suggested approval of the site plan, we wouldn't all be here right now in front of you. And they also did propose a resolution which I believe met several important conditions that were raised. So I don't know what more really is expected.
Okay, well, you can either ask, do you want us to vote on it up or down and then see how that goes? If you want that, that's certainly your prerogative. If you want it voted thumbs up or thumbs down today, that's fine, if you're not willing to change it.
Well, if you would give us a positive vote, we would agree to a condition that we continue to work with, I mean, I don't know that we're ever going to.
Okay.
We've already tried to meet their standards, and we have.
So you want an up or down today? You don't want to continue it or table it to allow you to work with staff?
Well, how long would that be tabled for, Mr. Barnes?
Mr. Chairman, in answer to his concern on how long, I would have no problem with you directing staff to start working with you ASAP. It's your time frame.
Can we talk about a maximum of a 30-day window?
Sure, fine with me.
Okay, the only time I won't be available the beginning of December, but other than that.
Okay, well, let's see. Let's give it 30, see if we can work it out. If we can't, then you can either come back and ask us to
Mr. Chairman, if I
approve
can,
it or disapprove it. Yes.
If you're going to put a time onto, let's go to a particular board meeting target date, and the two options that exist. And I see Mr. Anderson cringing. The two options that exist would either be November 25th, which I think is probably a little bit too early, or December the 13th, which I think is the next real day meeting that we've got.
There's no December 13th, Dennis.
Saturday.
Whatever the second, 9th? 9th.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will be available on December 9th, and Mr. Wexler will. The only thing I'm going to ask this commission, and in all candor, we have worked with 4 different people at planning and 3 different people at environmental, and it's difficult sometimes to know who's steering the boat, if I might say. And I just, we've asked for input from staff as to what they would recommend, and actually we have not gotten it in specific terms. We've gotten generalities. This is the first time that we've,
Okay, I get.
Do you understand? You get my drift?
Yes, I do.
Good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Kay, your primaries on this in my office will be Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Flores, and in environmental, I think I can look at Ms. Bestie as being the primaries on that one. So those are the critical players you need to work with at the staff level, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I didn't mean to suggest you weren't persuasive. You are, but I just didn't think you were going to succeed, at least today. So, okay. December 9th, it sounds like. Thank you, and we appreciate you working with us, and we'll get there, I think. We need to take a 5-minute break. All right, we are trying to get back together as your Board of County Commissioners, and next up is 6B and C, but we have one very brief, I hope, thing I'd like to move ahead, and that's Treasure Coast Sports Commission. Can we take that? That doesn't sound controversial. Mr. Anderson? Who's going to take this item?
Mr. Chair, I believe Gayla is taking that.
Where's? Okay. And while she's talking, we have some discussion on the reserve among staff so that we can hopefully come up with a better plan on that. Thank you, sir. Gayla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. For the past 4 years, the Board of County Commissioners has approved giving the Treasure Coast Sports Commission an annual grant utilizing tourism revenue. This year, we are seeking approval to renew and to increase the grant from $30,000 to $35,000. As the Treasure Coast Sports Commission annual report shows, and that's included in your packet, the direct economic impact coming just into St. Lucie County from last year 02-03 was over $4 million. The year before, 01-02, $1,200,000 was generated. In just 1 year, statistics show an increase of $2,800,000 sports revenue over the previous year. This year, over 9,300 room nights were generated in St. Lucie County with sporting activities. These figures can and will continue to grow each year with the financial support of the county and the Tri-County areas. Using the 02-03 figures of over $4 million in direct economic impact and comparing it to the sports grant that was granted for $55,000, the return on this investment was approximately 7,500%. For every grant dollar spent, we received back over $74. The Sports Commission staff has the experience to go out and solicit and attract new and larger sporting events to come into the Treasure Coast area, as the Florida Law Enforcement Games will attest. The Sports Commission sought and won to bid to host these games for June 2003 and 2004. There is an annual bid fee of $50,000 for each year. This fee is being split by the Tri-County areas. The expected revenue for this year's event is expected to be over $2.5 million. This figure was less than what we had anticipated due to the world situation and the war in Iraq. Many of the competitors were either in Iraq or on National Guard duty or covering the departments in the absence of their co-workers. In 2004, the games will be larger due to the fact that they will be open to the firefighters for the first time ever. The other good sporting news is that Florida Law Enforcement Game Board of Directors has just informed Tom Colucci, that the Treasure Coast Sports Commission will be eligible to submit a bid to host the 2006 International Police and Fire Games because of how well the Florida Law Enforcement Games were handled this year. The bid fee for that would be $50,000. There are many other events looking for new sporting venues, and the Sports Commission is ready to work with these organizations, but it will require additional support dollars to use as bid fee and the continuation of partial funding for the Sports Commission's second staff person. As the Treasure Coast Sports Commission event sponsorships and fees continue to expand and new revenues can be expected in the future, the TDC would like to request the Board of County Commissioners to consider approving again this year an additional $25,000 from the County Contingency Fund for the Treasure Coast Sports Commission. $15,000 of that amount would go towards a second staff person. The remaining $10,000 would go into a bid fund for future sporting events. Because the Treasure Coast Sports Commission has continued to grow over the last 4 years and gaining in experience and knowledge in the sports destination field, the Tourist Development Council feels that the time continues to be right to push forward with additional support dollars going to the Sports Commission, and in return for this support, St. Lucie County and the Treasure Coast will continue to benefit year after year. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions or comments before the vote?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Quick question, since it references partial funding, I would imagine the other counties are increasing their contributions as well?
Yes, and if we might, may I bring Mr. Colucci up to specifically define that?
He has a very brief presentation. Right, Mr. Colucci?
I'm Tom Colucci, Executive Director of the Treasure Coast Sports Commission. As you know, Martin County has passed a bed tax and has extended revenue to us to use to bring in more dollars. Last year they gave us $25,000 along with $15,000 from the Hotel Motel Association, which helped pay for law enforcement. This year their commitment will be $65,000, so they've increased theirs. Indian River County is staying status quo. We had asked for $70,000. Last year we received $65,000, and they reduced it to $61,500. But in Indian River County, our big issues are that they don't have the venues that Martin County and St. Lucie County have, so we think their contribution is significant. Also, what I'd like to do is just give you these booklets from law enforcement.
What funding too? They were asking for funding. Thanks.
Regarding funding?
How the funding's divided up if we're paying
okay.
$15,000 towards.
Martin County has $15,000 for law enforcement, $35,000 for administrative, marketing, and sponsorship, and event bid fees and sponsorships of $15,000 for a total of $65,000. I don't have Indian River counties with me, but if I can remember correctly, it was $15,000 for law enforcement. I believe it was $30,000 for administrative and marketing, and another $15,000, which came out to $17,000, I think, if that's correct, for bid fees and sponsorships.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Lewis.
No, thank you, sir. Thank you.
I have one more comment. International games, we have to pay a $50,000 bid fee, but we get to keep all the revenue streams. So it could actually mean a positive cash flow for the counties, where we would actually have money to put back in.
Good. Okay. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Has staff come up with the magic solution for the 2 reserve items?
Well, we have no magic solution yet in total, but I have some in parts. And, Mr. Chairman, if I can briefly, let me go through items B and C real fast.
Okay.
Say what the recommended plan of action and what you have in front of you is. Mr. Chairman, you have in front of you item 6B deals with parcel 34A through E at the reserve, also known as the Lakes. It's the final plat approval for that area. Back in April, that project, that area of the reserve received site plan approval through the public hearing process for a final PUD for the project that's in front of you right now, and I think highlighted up on the monitors. Following that, the next step in the development process is to bring forward construction plats, and that is what is in front of you tonight. That's what was in front of you a couple of weeks ago, and that's what's in front of you again this afternoon, looking for final approval. When this matter was presented to you a few weeks ago, there were concerns raised by the residents out at the reserve and the board members regarding traffic conditions. Staff was directed to come in and put together a report for a workshop presentation, and as we mentioned earlier today, we're out of meeting dates, so this is the purpose of the discussion here. Our focus on this has been on the external impacts of the project. That is, within the reserve DO condition, there are something like 40 or 45 some traffic conditions that we addressed on a point-by-point basis, highlighting where they are in terms of county satisfaction of requirements. In addition to that, there's also recently approved, as I mentioned earlier today, another development order for the area known as PGA Villages, which is in the city of Port St. Lucie. And we highlighted that in our report as well, noting that there are a couple of global type issues in there that the board may wish to consider. And I want to briefly touch on what those global considerations were. One dealt with potential improvement requirements at the interchange of I-95 and St. Lucie West Boulevard, Reserve Boulevard. One dealt with potential improvement requirements, reconstruction requirements that the board needs to be aware of at the intersection of Reserve Boulevard and Commerce Center Drive, the roundabout. And the other one deals, and the final one deals with the right-of-way reservation for the extension of West Virginia Drive westerly out to Glades Cutoff and Rangeline Road. Those are in just a cursory review of the DO, because I only got a full copy of it yesterday. What I would see as being the 3 most highlightable issues of potential concern to the board from a global point of view. That being said, again, looking at the external traffic impacts of the reserve, I need to report to you, and I can report to you, that the county has been working with the primary developer, Coulter, for signalization improvements at the on and off ramps. We are in the process of working with them right now to finalize the security requirements to have them post up the money to cover the signalization there. And if everything goes right, that signalization work will be done in the next few months. The other item that we've been working with them on, it deals with the bridge over the interstate. And in the new PGA Villages DO, there are obligations that call for a fair share contribution by the reserve and PGA Villages, Coulter basically, to go into improving that interchange. Preliminary indications are that they are going to move forthwith on that, and we may see some movement in this area in very short order, and we'll be coming back to you with some more details as they all come together. So in very brief terms, although traffic conditions out at that interchange right now in peak hour ain't great, there is light on the horizon, and both through incremental and more long-term improvements that should be taking place in very short order. Now, go back to the one other issue that's on there, and board members may wish to discuss this further and provide direction to staff, deals with the extension of West Virginia Drive westerly. That was a development order condition in the city of Port St. Lucie, and based upon what you want to either discuss today or discuss over the next couple of weeks, getting back to me hopefully by the end of the 25th, if we want to have further issues about that. Now, I know that is of interest to some board members, and we don't have to go into it today. That then leaves only one issue to come in and discuss, and that kind of ties back into parcel 34. Somewhere zooming down here. Okay. Between the reserve and PGA Villages, and again, for the record, the reserve is that area of the unincorporated county of the reserve development and regional impact existing today. PGA Villages is that area within the city of Port St. Lucie approved as a development and regional impact last night by the city. With these two adjoining projects, the master plan for PGA Villages indicated that there would be 2 ground connection points between the developments. One would be at the southeastern end of the project, which would be parcel, what we refer to as parcel 34. That would be this area I'm about to point to here. And then the other connection point would be in what we refer to as parcel 38. The residents refer to it as the Saddlebrook connection, and that is this area right here. This area here is currently the subject of a major adjustment application filing with the county. That, as I indicated in our last meeting, is under review at this moment and is not yet scheduled for public hearing. Quite frankly, I don't think that public hearing is going to be scheduled until at least after Christmas, given where we are at the calendar right now. The other connection is one that has been a part of the approved Parcel 34 development plan and has been a part of the approved PUD 3 for the reserve plans since the mid-1990s. That is the one that has generated the most controversy at the moment, because that is the one that the developers, Coulter, are seeking to have plat approval on tonight, or today. Noting the comments that were raised earlier about trying to have some greater traffic assessment of the internal connections, the DRI report for PGA Villages included a traffic section that was about 6 inches thick. Among the many things that were in that were internal assessments, internal trip assignments, and basically looking at it as what the impacts would be coming to the various access points within the project. I'm not prepared to go into a whole lot of minutia detail on that one. I can address it in general terms, but what we are going to suggest today, that if the board wishes to review that further, that we reschedule a internal connection discussion for a date in the future. That date could either be in December or probably in January, which is just where we are right now, to go into that issue of internal connection between the north and the south. The board, however, still needs to maybe do some secondary discussion on the development order conditions, the ones that I highlighted that some of you may be aware of. If there's a concern about those, we may need to act a little quicker. There's like three different issues that are out here. And the board is also going to need to make a decision as to whether or not they're prepared to come in and address Parcel 34, which is Coulter is requesting final plat approval on, and they've already got site plan approval on too. It would be my recommendation at this point that with a assurance from Coulter that there are no plans, intentions, whatever, of coming in and doing anything to provide the connection from Parcel 34 to the area in Port St. Lucie. Again, I can't quite reach that area there. If there are no intentions to provide any ground connection in that area, that the board proceed with final authorization on Parcel 34. At the same time, the board take no action on Parcel 38, the Saddlebrook connection, because that will be subject to future discussion. And that, in conjunction with, or as a, it's really going to be up to you whether you want to do it in a workshop or you want to do it as a part of the public hearing or you want to do it whatever, but that we take the whole internal connection question. I can get you the reports if you want to read through the traffic analysis of it and determine if it is or is not appropriate to have the level of interconnectivity between that portion of the reserve PGA Villages north of Canal C-24 and PGA the Reserve. Now, that's kind of a complicated issue out there, but I guess the bottom line is staff recommends approval of 34 with limiting conditions, and that we hold or we continue or we defer the workshop discussion on the remaining access connection points until sometime early January at this point, affording an opportunity for both the county, Coulter, and the interested residents to address any particular issues that may be out there and try to solve what's on here.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we not need to have those discussions? I thought you indicated we had a time frame to address the issue.
The time frame that I'm concerned about would be the other three or the other development order conditions that may affect some policy parts of this county commission regarding westerly development. That's not really the same boat as the residents. I don't think they're that concerned about that. That may affect Coulter, but it's really going to be more of a policy discussion between the board and your staff here as to do we want to do or do we want to raise any concern about extending West Virginia Drive out into new territory, or do we wish to simply remain silent onto it? I'm bringing that to your attention because I have to bring that to your attention because that is in the DO. Now, I just got a copy of the DO or the clean copies of it yesterday.
So this connection is not going to be part of that comment?
The internal connections are not a part of that at all.
Okay.
That's a different, that's a site plan issue that can be dealt with.
Thank you.
The broader one that I have a question on is the West Virginia connection. So I said there are like three things that are out here.
Mr. Chairman, can we go back for a minute? Dennis, you'd made the statement that the connection from parcel 34 has been there since the mid-90s.
Yes.
You gave us a stack of about 60 or 70 pages on this item, and I did read through those. On the very back page, if you could pull that and...
The map H?
Yes. I don't know if I believe it's H. It's page 58 of the development order. Is that the same as H?
If it's the graph.
It actually shows the connection that you referred to that's been there since the mid-90s. If I could have my fellow board members refer to this map, and Dennis, if you can point to where I'm talking about, the connection you referred to that's been there since the mid-90s?
Right.
Is that little sliver?
I can't zoom any more than that.
Okay, but could you point it out so that everyone can see what I'm talking about? It's not that little sliver that...
No, that little sliver is actually a drainage discharge.
Okay, so the master plan does not have... Well, the area to the southwest of the existing development in our comprehensive plan was agriculture. So whatever linkage that was there never anticipated a DRI with, 6,000 units?
Well, there were two linkages in that southeast corner. There was Reserve Commerce, well, was what we call Reserve Commerce Center Drive, which was the main artery.
Right.
Which was over here.
Which we're seeing connecting to the south into West Virginia corridor and wrapping down into Gatlin. I understand that piece.
And then the other one that originally was there, and this was the original map, showed what we now refer to as parcel 34. It's kind of that hammerhead down there, that little barbell type configuration. That is the original plan. That plan was later amended through the county's PUD process back in the mid-1990s. I can't give you the precise date off the top of my head. I have to go pull that back out of the files. But that then showed a reconfiguration of that southeastern corner where it has that little barbell configuration to provide for a roadway stub to go south into what was either then the Moose or the Holcomb property. I'm not sure which one it was.
Okay, and what was on that property? Single-family home?
Vacant residential, although I think part of it was in the city and it may have had a higher density than we had.
Okay, well,
It had an RS land use.
What I haven't seen is any transportation plan that shows that connection. I'm hearing verbal descriptions of this and that. I don't really see anything that identifies a clear linkage between a new DRI that in our comp plan was agricultural land linking through existing neighborhoods and saying that we've already approved this in the 90s. I think that that is not what's been approved and that this is a major adjustment to this road network. And we should be looking at that big picture before we are being asked to approve this on a small scale, referring to the plat. And when you say we approved the site plan that had it on it, if you look at that site plan, it's virtually impossible to even be able to tell that that's in fact what staff was putting in front of us is this major connection between two very large projects. So I think that it hasn't been very forthcoming in terms of what we've been voting on, and specifically two little lines on a map that identify this connection. And I'm not pleased with the way this has been handled with this board, and certainly not the public, in terms of being open about this discussion. So,
well, All I can say right now, Commissioner, is that I'll go back and get the drawings for you and show you the chronologic history of how that was put in there, and
well,
that's the best I can show you.
Even if you show me that chronology, though, Dennis, the point is the area that you're connecting to is agriculture. So all those past approvals connected to agricultural areas that were not intended to be developed at these current intensities. To change from 1 unit per 5 acres to, 3 units per acre, a 15-fold increase in density and a substantially more development, obviously that is going to affect the transportation network that was previously envisioned. Hence the need to go back and address the big picture and look at this road network and see if it would negatively affect these residents. That's all we're asking. And instead of it coming in as a little side notation that only the people who sat behind closed doors or in the DRC actually knows what it means.
Wow.
And that's I think, what the frustration you're hearing from the residents who live there, and my frustration as well. I think this issue should have been out front, very clear to everybody what we were talking about, and then make a decision based on the various options that are available to us.
What do you suggest we do then?
I think the idea of moving forward today with a plat that's clearly noted, and I'd like some comments from our attorney about whether that'll be interpreted in the future as some type of approval for this connection. As I said earlier, I have no problem with the plat and the development within the existing reserve area. I have a problem with the connection being noted on that plat when we haven't had that discussion. If we can accomplish those two goals, I'll be happy. And I think the residents will be too.
Could I suggest something along the lines of what Dennis was talking about? Chairman Barnes?
You can suggest anything you want.
Regardless of past history and whether or not things were shown and what sorts of intensities were available on the land that was recently acquired and existed north of the canal but was not part of the reserve, there were underlying land uses, but I don't think, first of all, on parcel 34, the plat, I think what we're asking and I think what we're agreeing to is that if we can approve the plat today, Coulter will clearly acknowledge that that plat approval does not constitute an approval of this connection. And we would like to, as Dennis suggested, come back to the board after meeting with the staff and continuing to meet with the residents to talk about both of these internal connections. There may be solutions that we haven't addressed yet or thought of, and there may be a better solution to the situation. I don't think that has anything to do with parcel 34 if it can be approved in the context of only approving the plat and clearly not approving the connection. So that's what we would ask you to do, and we would commit to work with the staff and to continue to meet with the residents to discuss these other connections, be it for a workshop or a protracted public hearing or whatever.
Could we just have Mr. McIntyre respond to that suggestion, which I think there's consensus on?
Mr. Chairman, what I would suggest then is that we put a specific note in the plat to that effect. In other words, a specific note that the approval of the plat 34 does not involve any approval of the connection, and that, period. And that would make it clearer than what the existing language is right now, which kind of leaves it open for the developer to use it for future use. I'd suggest we have a specific note, again, that clarifies and specifies that there is no approval of that specific location for access.
And we could agree to that condition being put on the plat approval.
Okay, this isn't a public hearing, but we agreed to hear some comments from the public, so why don't we do that now?
Yeah, and could I ask that in the event, could I have time at the end?
Sure, we'll be here. We have a 1 o'clock meeting, keep in mind, so we're trying to at least have a short break for lunch. Is it 1 or 1:30? 1.
Mr. Chairman and the members of the Commission, thank you for taking the time to listen to us. We know this is aggravation for you, but it's aggravation for us also. If I truly believed, and a week ago I would have, if I truly believed that there wasn't some sneaky way to get around that connection road issue, we would probably back off and say, go ahead and approve the Plat 34. But whenever there's a conversation a little while ago in your men's room where an individual tells a member of Coulter, go ahead and get your plat approval because fire will demand a connection in between and you'll have what you want. How are we supposed to feel about the process? And that stinks. So our level of trust is gone. When Dennis was talking to us to try to reach a compromise, and we don't want to be here till 1 o'clock either. We have meetings at 1:30. All of a sudden, the word, okay, it's not on the plat. I said, but there's a connection road. Oh, but it is on the site plan. I don't know what all the words are. If it's site plan, it's plat, it's ABC. But if that connection road is somewhere, and there isn't a written affidavit from the Coulter Development that they are giving up that right until there is some other future discussion, and it's not in writing, then I can't believe what they say. We were led to believe in a meeting this past week with the developer that this lower portion was 800 homes. All of a sudden we find out a whole PUD was sent to the city in July, and that PUD has 1,330 homes on it. So we're really getting sick and tired of being given misinformation. I'm not going to say we're being lied to deliberately, but we're trying our best out there. We're representing our homeowners, and we're not engineers, but we are concerned citizens. And we don't have a level of trust. Maybe you will, but we just don't.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
After hearing y'all and meeting with the developer, is the homeowners association against all connections whatsoever between your development and the other development, or are you just trying to figure out the best place to put them? That's what
we are against connecting the city DRI that was approved last night with unincorporated reserve. When we purchased in the reserve, there was an outline of what the reserve DRI was. Now they'll say, yeah, but you can have 4,100 homes and we can expand the boundaries. That's not what they sold to people.
Okay, so you're against any...
We are against any connections. Okay. Chris Cooper last night said, why don't you just put a second bridge across the canal and all of your city stuff north of Canal 24 will have 2 connections to the south. Don't connect to these people at all. That's not what they bought for. If the name wasn't Coulter and it was Joe Blow Real Estate Developer Company, we wouldn't be having these conversations because they would not have the right to come into a gated community and open up our doors to 500, 1,000, 2,000, whatever homes.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, what you're talking about is new connections, because the Commerce Center Parkway, is that what it's called?
That's outside of the reserve.
It goes through the existing reserve, but it was originally planned. I mean, it ties into the roundabout and certainly abuts or whatever the technicality. That connection is already there. That's not the one that I'm hearing from the residents.
We're talking about internal.
Exactly. Okay. And I want to make sure that everyone up here knows exactly what we're talking about, because the Commerce Center Park has always been envisioned as the linkage between those 2 projects. It's the areas going into these neighborhoods, I think, that they're objecting to the most.
Okay.
And we would urge you to appeal the approval last night of the 30, you have 30 days to do that, to appeal that approval. That approval was totally based upon interconnections to the reserve. Vice Mayor Christensen said, well, what if the county doesn't approve that? And Steve Ball told him that the developer would have to go back to the city because the approval is based on that. We told them they didn't have the authority to make approvals in the county when they were the city, and they voted on it anyhow.
All right, and that goes back to my earlier comments to Mr. Murphy, as my frustration of why that issue wasn't raised and brought to this board for consideration, so we could provide input to the city without having to do it through an appeal process, but to do it through the normal process and provide comments to them about ways in which we'd like to see the road network established so that development can occur in a timely fashion, doesn't cause them delay, but doesn't negatively affect residents living in the unincorporated county. I just think the process needs to be a little bit more proactive as opposed to reactive here.
And we need to have a guarantee that if you go ahead and vote for this Plat 34, that it's written in stone and blood that there is no connection. I don't care what plan it's drawn on.
I'm not even saying that. I'm saying I'm not here today voting for or against it until we've had a look at the global picture. We don't know what the final answer should be until we have all that information. So I don't want anyone to feel like the vote today is decisive. What it is saying is we need factual information and the big picture before we're asked to make a decision.
Well, what we're really disappointed in, Commissioner Coward, is that we all believed when we left here last time that there was going to be a workshop. And it was a fluke accident that we looked at your agenda yesterday and found out the lakes was put back on and no one was informed. Thank you.
And I concur with that, and I personally apologize to the citizens in the reserve because I think we've made a mistake. I don't know why it happened, but I'm personally embarrassed by it. We did say that we would have a workshop to deal with this regional network, and then this item came back on the agenda. It should not have happened, and we will have to take credit for that, even though we made it clear that we wanted to have that discussion.
Good morning, afternoon, guess it's still morning. I will be brief. I'm sensitive to your timeline needs. I think that you need to look at the approval of Parcel 34 as premature for the following reason. There is no certainty regarding what the traffic magnitude will be to be relayed to potential buyers. If that ends as a cul-de-sac, which is the current intent, nothing beyond that, it's one thing. If it's a flow road for between 13,000 and 14,000 additional residents, it's another story. I would not want to purchase under those circumstances, and I don't think it's smart for a developer to want to sell with that uncertainty hanging out there. It's clearly premature to me. You've heard before, I've reviewed the DRIs for PGA South and the Reserve, looking at them in some detail. Those two communities are incompatible because of the design differences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. How many other items do we have on? You're going to move one, did you say, Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Chair, we have obviously 6B, 6C, 6D, 6F. We're passing on 6G, 6H, which is minor. Then we got 8A and 8B.
We can do 8B another day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Council, Commission, my name is Bill Cannell, for the record, 8420 Muirfield Way in the Reserve. And I would like to go back to Parcel 38 just for 1 minute. This is 38, the connection at Saddlebrook. And I would have addressed this in the public comment period. As Dennis has put that up there, and you see the maps that we distributed actually have our neighborhood, the Muirfield Way street is adjacent to that Saddlebrook Drive. The Saddlebrook Drive extension is not on the master plan. Dennis said that. It is up for a major adjustment right now. We all bought our lots and houses on Muirfield Way knowing it was not in the DRI. And we knew where the boundaries were. And now the boundaries are changing almost overnight. My Muirfield neighborhood, and unless I say the other 1,500 residents of the Reserve, will be substantially impacted if this road is opened up. I have slogged my way through some of that 6 inches in that binder Dennis is talking about at the city on the traffic report. It's actually about 10 inches thick. And the first quarter of that is phase 1 of the traffic through 2008. I believe, after looking at that, and I'm not a traffic expert, I'm just a layman, but it seems that you all need, or the developer needs, or we need an objective study of the traffic based solely on what's going to happen at those internal connections. Because I think, you know, they go through a lot of facts and figures about traffic flow at the major intersections, at the Circle and at the Light and Commerce Parkway. But I want to see some definitive numbers and study on what's going to happen at Champions Way and at Saddlebrook. And unless I missed it, that is not in that traffic study. And we can talk all day about the gross numbers, but that doesn't, I don't think that gets us anywhere. Specific question then in closing for Dennis probably. The DRC meeting on this issue, has the developer responded to the DRC questions yet?
I don't know. I have to go back and check the files.
And if they have, how did they answer the question about the necessity for the access roadway, which is the Saddlebrook connection?
Again, I have to check the file. I don't know off the top of my head.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to address the board? Okay.
I'd just like to say that in response to Mrs. Hammer's comment, I don't know what conversation went on, but to the degree that we would be acknowledging, signing something or whatever, that we clearly acknowledge that the parcel 34 plat does not in any way constitute an acknowledgement of that connection, we'll do it. We have development work going on in 34. We do have an approved site plan, but we clearly will acknowledge that that connection is no part of this approval. We'd like to ask for your approval, and we would also, as I said, we'll agree to come in and do a workshop. We'll work with the staff. We'll continue to meet with the residents.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dennis, on the connections, would this board have to approve the interconnections?
38, yes. And we have a difference on whether the one at 34 is already shown on the site plan or not. But
Dennis, in light of what they just said,
if you put that condition on there, it's coming back to the board no matter what.
So,
yeah, so when we agree to that condition,
So
we understand we have to come back.
Any interconnection would have to come before this board.
With that condition, that reinvigorates, if you will, or reestablishes 34 back in play.
Well, then it doesn't seem to me the actions of the city council, we would have to appeal if the connections have to come back to us for approval anyway. What am I missing there?
I don't know on that one. You lost me on that one.
Okay. Well, okay. What's the pleasure of the board on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to move forward with parcel 34, approval of it with the condition that there is not a connection and that if there's one ever proposed, it comes back to this board. Is that the correct language that we need to word it as, Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, ma'am. We'll work on the essence of it, but yes, ma'am, there would be the approval does not constitute an approval of a connection, and that there would be no approvals until specifically granted by the board.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, with the indication that my memory was the same as yours, I did not recall that we promised a workshop, but I'm certainly not adverse to having one. I'd like to second that motion so we can move ahead, and I guess we will be looking then at having a workshop. That was my question.
I just need a date.
Okay.
And quite honestly, Mr. Anderson, I think we're probably looking January.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Dennis, with everything scheduled between now and the end of the year, January, or we had one date in December. I don't know if we'd be ready for that or not, December 9th.
Mr. Chairman, going back to, I believe it was Commissioner Lewis's question regarding your statement about the 30-day window we have.
That's the second issue that's, I think, beyond some of the internal connection points, and that was the DO itself, and that was where I was highlighting a couple of points in the development order that have been of interest to us in the past.
Doesn't the development order identify these linkages, though?
No.
They do not?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. I'd like verification.
Only well, the actual written development order does not. No, it does not. But by reference to Map H, which is the master land use plan map within the DO, there would be reference to that, yes.
So by reference, we should review this within the 30-day window.
I'm sorry, there is in the fire condition, there is a specific reference that provides for a connection between Plantation Lakes Drive and the existing reserve DRI community and PGA villages. So yes, there is a specific reference in the development order as well as another one down at Champions Way within under condition 47.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Murphy, is that not the one that the fire department requested that was going to be, 12-foot gated? You all are the only ones going through for emergency.
Let me clarify what the district position is with respect to a connection or a linkage between the two DRIs. The fire district is only interested in emergency access. That has nothing to do with traffic or a designated roadway. It's strictly emergency access. In this particular parcel, the north segment of the PGA Village DRI is somewhat isolated from our emergency response routes. The way the property is set up and the way the project is scheduled to be developed, the northern portion of the canal, or the section north of the C-24 canal, will be developed first. The interconnecting bridge that the fire district also requires probably won't be built until 2008, and yet there will still be residences built before that time on the north side of the canal. So from the fire district's perspective, the problem becomes, well, how do you access or service those areas to the north of the canal if there's no connection between the two DRIs? Hence, the fire district's requirement for an emergency access route, if that clarifies things.
And I stand corrected on to that wasn't in the traffic section. That was under the other urban services part of the order, condition number 54, not 47, and that one we missed.
But the DO that we're talking about that was approved by the City of Port St. Lucie, as it relates to these connections, is that solely for emergency access only, or is it for a broader interconnect that would allow trips beyond that need? I think the answer is the latter. It's for general use. It's not restricted to emergency use. So, again, this issue should have been addressed by this board. We should have debated the issue, and we haven't. And I think that's why we have this problem right now.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, just in the last...
Yes,
no,
you did. I did.
No. Was it seconded? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh.
So what's the answer on whether we'll have say-so over the connections without having to appeal Port St. Lucie's order? Am I mixing two issues up?
No, you're not. With the language that's in this condition, we may, and the concerns that's being expressed here, we may need to, and I'll have to get with Mr. McIntyre to find out exactly the right process to make sure it's all correct. We may need to pursue some additional appeal language.
When's our next meeting?
Our next meeting?
Yes.
Next week.
Okay. So we can certainly address it at that time.
Yes.
All right. We've had a motion and a second, and we need to proceed here. Please.
You've got to clarify the motion, though, because it said if the connection is going to be pursued, we'll address it. And we know that the connection is already in the DO, so I think it should be that we're going to address this within that 30-day time frame.
Commissioner Coward, I stand to correct you. That's not with how the motion...
Okay, if you could restate it, then I misunderstood. I thought you said if they chose the connection to pursue it, it would come back to this board.
I had moved approval of parcel 34 with the condition that it was not showing the connection, that we all agreed upon that.
Right.
And that if they wanted to move forward with that at some point in time, it was to come back as a separate issue to this board.
Okay. And it's that latter part where you know they want to move forward because their DO identifies them moving forward. So all I'm suggesting is to modify that last part to say that we'll address this issue within that 30-day window that we have. That was all I was suggesting.
If we're going to address it within the 30 days, then I have no problem dropping that
That's
section
fine,
of it.
too. That's fine, too.
Okay. I just don't feel I'm prepared to sit here. I don't want the impression that I'm saying there's never going to be a connection when I don't have the information in front of me. We've not talked to the city.
I think we actually agree 100% on this. I'm just frustrated that we haven't been a part of the broader discussion. I'm not saying I have made up my mind as to what should be done. I just like to be a part of the discussion with both the developer and the community being involved too.
Not to belabor the issue, Commissioner Coward, but didn't this all go before the Treasure Coast Regional Planning and
In a broader context it did, but not in the level of detail of this nature. This is something that we as a county commission should be dealing with.
And I believe at some point we did try to discuss it. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just saying it's not too long ago we did sit down with the city and to no avail, as I recall, as some of the discussions went.
Yeah, the attitude of the city at the Regional Planning Council was that because they're annexing this property, they will look at this as a sovereign nation, and they do not need to consider the impacts to the surrounding area. And the point is that the impacts of this development do not stop at the city limits. People do not drive their cars and stop at the city limits and get out. They send their kids to schools in a countywide system. There's a countywide fire district. We're all impacted by this development. So we need to be better coordinating our development activities. That's the message I'm trying to send here. Whether the city cares or not, they've got to, because they're affecting other taxing authorities and residents that live in the unincorporated county. And we're not doing a very good job of being plugged into this process, and it's probably partly our fault as well. So.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Coward.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Lewis.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Hutchison.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. We'll move now to St. Lucie County, the Northwestern Greenways and Trails Conceptual Plan.
Mr. Chairman, before we go into that, can I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
get a clarification, since last week there was some miscommunication or misunderstanding of it? Are we definitely having a workshop in a workshop setting, or are we having discussion at a future board meeting in January?
Think the W word in January.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, some information for the board about the 1 o'clock meeting that may impact on how you want to address the remainder of your agenda. It's my understanding that the parties are going to be requesting a continuance at 1 o'clock. They were very close to settling. 2 of the 3 parties have actually signed a settlement agreement. The 3rd party has not yet signed, but they are jointly going to agree to request a continuance of at least a week. So that you still will need to meet.
So we'll be able to eat lunch after that without worrying about a 4 o'clock lunchtime.
Yes.
Okay.
Or you, yes. I guess it's.
Well, let's keep working.
I was going to say,
Okay, sounds
or
great.
can we break now and then do that meeting and continue this one after that, if that's nothing more than a continuance?
It's up to the board. I wanted to, that's a possibility, but it's up to the chair and the rest of the board how they want to
I mean,
handle it.
it's going to take us another hour, so let's just keep going, then we'll get out for good. Is that a problem? It's up to y'all. We're all here. Yes, ma'am.
Diana Waite with the Planning Division. Do you want to take this item now?
Please.
This presentation is regarding the results of a charrette that was held in the northeastern St. Lucie County area earlier this summer. The purpose of the charrette was to identify additional greenways and trails in that area. Okay, now wait a minute. You have a handout of the PowerPoint. I won't go through each slide because of the time period and you're running late. I will reference it that we do have several comprehensive plan directives in our comprehensive plan in the conservation element that directs the county to develop a greenway plan to facilitate ecological and recreational greenways. In the recreation open space element, we have objective to provide for integrated system of greenways and trails and to finalize the Greenways and Trails Master Plan that was adopted in 2001. The workshop boundaries extended from the Atlantic Ocean to approximately Emerson Avenue. During the workshop, participants looked beyond those boundaries down to the C-25 canal. So the final plan that was put together from after compiling all the proposals included trails from the North County line to C-25. The plan proposes 9 multiple-use trails, a separate bike trail, a separate equestrian trail, a paddling trail, as well as an interpretive trail that takes place on several sites. The couple of the priority trails were the Old Dixie Highway Heritage Trail, which extends along Dixie Highway from A1A to the North County line. We also have an important Lakewood Park Connector Trail that would extend from the proposed Capon Trail Park to the eastern side of Lakewood Park, the Eastwood Canal. And that would provide access across the Lakewood Park area from the Portofino shores over to the proposed Capon Trail Regional Park. We have a number of public and private resources in the North County that would be benefited by these trail systems. We have 10 tracks within the boundary area that totals over 3,000 acres that have been purchased since 1995. The Heritage Trail particularly would connect, I believe, 5 of those projects, and the trail could ultimately be connected to the city of Fort Pierce. The plan itself utilizes canals in the planning area extensively. The bicycle trail extends along Emerson Avenue, the Equestrian Trail along Seminole Avenue. And we have a multiple-use trail along Kings Avenue. All of those trails extend to C25, at which point they merge and extend east into the urban area. The plan identifies 6 potential trailheads, one which would be at the Ridge Haven area of the airport, and that particular trailhead is proposed to incorporate also a BMX track for bicycles as well as ATV users and a skate park. That recommendation come out of discussions with the airport director and the recreation director and assistants regarding related to requests that they have had over the years for those type of uses, and we currently don't have them in the county. So that is public land. It will require FAA approval to utilize that, but it appears that that is a potential use of that property. Quickly, the next steps to create these trails would be to create a Greenway and Trail Steering and Advisory Committee. And that could be a subgroup of the Recreational Advisory Board with some participants from the individual user groups. That group could prioritize the bike, multi-use, and equestrian trails, and ultimately we need to find a funding source for the construction of these trails. This particular plan will help as we seek funds from grant programs across the state. There's almost 80 miles of trails on here. They're a tool for your planning, and we would like to suggest that you would accept this plan as something that we might implement and utilize over the time period as we form a Greenways and Trails Steering Committee. And if you have any specific directions, we'd be glad to work towards meeting those. Thank you.
The only other request I have is to try to utilize the airport property as much as possible for multi-uses, especially off-road vehicles. There's a lot of just pepper tree forests, open pasture, and there's very little opportunity in the county to legally ride off-road vehicles, and that's a perfect place for it. There are also beautiful parts of the airport property that would be good for more passive recreation, and that's a huge piece of land, and we ought to be using it. Even if it's on a temporary basis, we ought to be opening it up for public use rather than just have a big fence around, what is it, 3,500 acres, 4,000 acres, something like that. There are
One
a lot
of the largest trails is a nature trail through the conservation areas or areas that have been labeled as conservation over the years. You have an extensive plan in front of you. One of the recommendations there is that we clearly identify what areas we want to protect within that, and including the scrub habitat, and provide a management plan so we can maintain and utilize those native plant communities, as well as provide a nature trail through them. And I understand that there is an existing trail there. It just needs to be formalized. We need to identify the entry point and the exit point, and formalize that more. So, and we probably will need a parking area also for folks to get on that trail.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, just a general comment, and to balance my negative comments about community development in the previous item, I'd like to compliment the department in this regard. I think they did an excellent job facilitating the charrette and also working in partnership with Harbor Branch and the local community. It was done at a very low cost and generated a lot of very positive ideas, and I just want to thank the staff as well as the participants. I know Mrs. Hearn is here, and she and others participated. I'm not sure if Mr. Banger did, but we got some excellent ideas, and I think this report will really help provide some guidance to this board about how to move forward with some excellent projects. So thank you for that effort.
All right. Next item is St. Louis County's ad valorem tax abatement. Who's taking this item?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Yes, sir.
What we have today is before you is
$10 fine for not identifying yourself. Put that in the kitty.
And go quickly.
No, you need to bring that microphone in a little bit and do identify yourself, please.
My name is Larry Dahm. I'm the Economic Development Manager for the county. What we have today in front of you is a revised ad valorem tax exemption program. We have upgraded or improved the program. We've made it into a program that can be put on our website. We have kept the basic state statutes in place as it relates to job criteria, job creation criteria, but we've also enhanced it by putting in some wage rate programs as well as a capital investment program.
Okay. This is pursuant to the voters approving the referendum. I believe it was in '92 and also another one in 2002. Is that right?
That's correct.
So we're enacting this to just clarify what our program is going to be.
That's correct.
Can you kind of go just through the highlights of the changes that we're making to the existing program?
I certainly can. The program was originally just based on job creation, as the state statute says. It was like 10 jobs for manufacturing, 25, so forth. There was no place in it to include a wage rate adjustment fee, as well as capital investment. And so we've come in with a new guideline proposal that talks about a wage rate, and there's actually a range of wage rates that you can get different points for, and it'll affect the amount or the length of the payout, or the exemption, actually, I should say. And the same with...
Before I leave that issue, can I just... Yes. Because that's the topic I wanted to have this for. I want to get input from my fellow board members. You said we put in a wage rate and we have a range, but we don't have a minimum, and that was one of the issues that I had talked to Mr. Dahm about before this meeting. We've done, with our job growth incentive program, we've put provisions in place that I believe mandate that in order to be eligible for those monies, you have to be at or above the average wage. And in the case here, we have put in language, but essentially you get a small penalty, but you'd still be eligible even if you were paying somebody minimum wage. Correct?
Yeah, right. That's correct.
So I'm curious if there's similar concerns that we ought to have at least a minimum in there And if there's not a consensus on that, I won't waste everybody's time. But I personally think that we do need to have some type of a minimum. I don't think we want to give tax breaks for minimum wage jobs. I think we're saying that we want to bring in higher-end manufacturing, clean industry, and if people meet those standards, they're eligible for various incentives. But I think we need to have those minimums in here. I personally would like to see them built in.
Mr. Chairman, can I follow up on Commissioner Coward just to clarify? Mr. Dom, you've actually got a minus 4 points.
Right. That's correct.
Instead of even a flat 0, which actually is going to take away points for coming below. Does that not work to our advantage in that regard?
What
the issue Commissioner Coward brought up?
Well, I'm sorry. We'll let Mr. Dom. Go ahead.
What it basically does is that for the individual or the company to get anything out of the tax exemption with a low wage, they're going to have a tremendous amount of jobs, a large number, or they're going to have a combination of a large number of jobs and of a capital investment. It was the intention that these are guidelines. These are not cast in stone, but these are guidelines. And it was to make it difficult if there was a low wage rate, let's say $11 an hour or $12 an hour, but we wanted to leave a little opening there that would bring it back to you and let you make that final decision. If there was a situation where there was a number of jobs at stake. And so the logic was to go to the minus 4 and take away the small side of the companies coming in, but leave it open for board's decision on the larger, and that's really what the intention was there.
Isn't all this still discretionary when it comes right down to it?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Personally, I've reviewed it and talked to staff. I'm happy with it. I think there's some businesses that might come in and may not have a lot of jobs. They may not even pay a lot of salary on the jobs, but they create a huge capital investment which pays the taxpayers a lot of money for very little services. So I certainly would want to leave the door open to that, and we'll have a healthy debate every time somebody comes in anyway if they're not good in all areas or they're weak in some areas. Did you have any other?
There was just one other thing that I want to point out.
Before you leave that issue, just a final comment. At the very least, then, if the consensus, although I haven't really heard a consensus, but if the consensus is to leave the language as is, could we at the very least at least get more information about the benefits that come with it? Because if it's a low-paying job with no benefits, I think we have to look more broadly at this issue. And we had a company come in before that I think paid $5.38 an hour, and we ended up giving them a couple $100,000. And the rationale was, well, our ordinance allows it, and yet no one really was too enthusiastic about doing so. And I, in fact, voted against it. And this board agreed we'd raise the bar. Now we're saying it's just a guideline, but yet we're still leaving that possibility there. So I'm not trying to prevent us from having some flexibility. What I'm trying to do is put at least a floor in for the $5.38 an hour type job, which I don't think we should be given tax breaks for. I still think there's a tremendous amount of flexibility like we had with QVC or those larger projects, but let's at least have a bare minimum in place that says a $5.38 an hour is not going to get $200,000 in tax breaks from St. Lucie County. That just does not make sense to me.
No, but my only point is that we may not be given tax breaks simply for jobs and salaries. We may because they're going to contribute a huge amount of money to our tax base and not use many services. So that may still be a plus, even if they don't create a lot of jobs or they create jobs with low wages. They may be paying a huge amount into the tax base to support all the things we try and do in this county.
Right. One final comment, and I'll stop. This is what we have before us is the tax abatement program, and your argument is that they're going to provide tax base to us, but through this ordinance we would abate those taxes. So not only would they be low-end paying jobs, they also wouldn't be paying taxes on that value.
Well, we wouldn't abate all the taxes. We don't give them 100% tax break. least not very likely.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Coward, would you, do you have a number in line or a concept of how low is low, or how?
Personally, since it is just a guideline, I think that we should remove less than $12 an hour. There's one that says 90% of average, and if maybe there's a notation at the bottom that talks about anything below that will be considered on a case-by-case basis, and other issues will be considered, benefits and total capital investment. But make it clear that that's really not what we're looking for. That's the kind of, I think we're kind of saying the same thing, we just have a little different parameter about how much we want to apply here, but that would be my personal preference. I don't think saying that we want jobs less than $12 an hour is good. I don't think we should have that in there. Even if it is a -4, it still says you're eligible, and I don't think that's what we want.
Mr. Chairman, I kind of, from coming in this from your point of view, I thought that this addressed more, the tax abatement issue always did address more of the investment being made. We have a job growth incentive program which specifically addresses on a dollar amount, item by item, the salary levels. So I'm more inclined to accept this as it's written and we've become more stringent on job growth incentive. I think we're looking at two different issues here. The tax abatement program, I don't think needs to address jobs that specifically. I think we've got points in here deducting eligibility points from those that don't meet the levels, but I'm not inclined to be any more stringent with this particular item.
Okay. What's the, Commissioner Hutchinson, what do you, I don't really object either way. It's all still, like we said, discretionary, but I do like the way it's written, so.
That's kind of the dilemma I'm caught in. I'm leery of losing jobs that may come in at $11.75 an hour, and it's 1,200 jobs or something. So I don't want to lose that opportunity because of one being so specific on one number. Although I do agree with Commissioner Coward, how low is low when you say less than $12. I'm of the mind to just leave it as it is. Again, it's strictly a guideline, and it's stated several times all the way throughout this.
Okay. Well, or we could put it off till Commissioner Bruns here, but if somebody wants to make a motion, let's consider it.
Motion to approve Resolution 03-258.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
No, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just want to make it clear, since we are being televised, and I'm fully supportive of the tax exemption program. I think it's been a wonderful tool for St. Lucie County. This board has used it very successfully over the last 4 or 5 years to bring in thousands of jobs. I just would like to raise the bar a little bit further.
Okay, did we postpone 6G?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We'll bring it back at some future date.
That's Economic Development Update. Citizens Steering Committee for North County Planning, Charette.
This is me, Mr. Chairman. You may recall that a couple of weeks ago, the board authorized the scheduling of a North County Planning Charrette for I believe it's the second week in January, maybe the third week. I have to check my calendar precisely. But one of the things that we need with that, and the Regional Planning Council will be conducting or spearheading it, one of the things we need is a citizens advisory group or a citizens steering group. I transmitted to you a memo about a week or so ago giving you a list of 11 possible categories. It's in the same thing on the agenda item here. Time is ticking, and I need some help to get bodies selected for the steering committee. I'm sure you don't have anybody in mind right now, but if you have people lined up or you have people who know you might be interested in this, we need to get them together as quickly as possible, like within the next 2 weeks, if at all possible, so that we can get our steering committee work done and maintain our schedules. Now,
how did we end up with a county-appointed board? Did we do this on purpose?
Pardon me?
How did we end up with a county-appointed board? Did we do this on
steering
purpose?
Committee?
Yes.
That's part of the process, is to have a citizen steering committee, and since we're the ones who are initiating the charrette, we need to get normally charrettes are kind of like initiated from like citizens groups, and they kind of get the neighborhood groups coming into it. Well, the county commission is the one who directed to go in and do it. So we're looking back to you all.
So once we appoint them, we'll cripple the very thing we're trying to accomplish, which is they will be unable to talk to each other because of the sunshine law.
Dan, does that apply in this case? For an advisory board? For
Again, if they're going to make recommendations, they're subject to the sunshine law. If they're just simply fact-finding, they would not be. It just depends on what their function is.
I guess I would say this is a fact-finding because the recommendations would come out of the charrette program.
That's good. I just don't want to appoint anybody and then they can't talk to the very people that they need to talk to.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a suggestion to staff? Is it possible you've got very specific areas listed on this list? Have you made any contact with the representatives of any of them?
I have not made any contact with anybody. I just made this list as kind of a first cut at who might be a likely candidate. The board, of course, can, if you have someone else or another group in mind, please feel free to insert them. Or if you wish me to make direct contacts, we can go and do that.
Well, I think in light of the time, and I know in the past when we've advertised in the paper, it's shot one of those whether anybody actually applies or not. I would suggest that you call each of the shareholders that you've got listed here and ask them to select someone from their own, like Lakewood Park property homeowners. They can select their own representative. You know, they all agree to. And then that way you're just bringing it down to us and again put an ad and solicit for any additionals for the at-large.
Is there any group that's kind of being missed in here that the board thinks should be added in here?
Mr. Chairman, the only one I had any question at all about was item 5. You're saying west of Emerson Avenue. It seemed to me that there were some people in that area that were really active that were kind of right on the dividing line there, and I wondered if we wanted to be that specific.
Well, I picked, and for the record, the item is representative landholders and owners west of Emerson. I picked that because that's really like the demarcation line between large tracts. East of that, there aren't any large tracts, and those folks that I think that are interested, I think, can get picked up under the either at-large community reps or other areas. I think there's some ways to pick up those folks.
Are these meetings going to be, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, are these meetings going to be open to the public if it's being done in a charrette fashion?
Well, the charrette will be, of course.
Okay.
What are these people going to do?
They're going to help to formulate, I believe, the goals and objectives and the targets for the charrette.
Isn't that a recommendation to us, though?
No, because you're basically going to be out of it until you get the final report that comes back through the charrette process.
Oh.
All you're doing is just appointing a steering group
to help set up the charrette.
Right.
So anyone who would not be appointed on the steering committee still has the opportunity to work in the charrette.
Absolutely.
So basically everyone
Absolutely.
be heard.
Yeah, and the purpose of the charrette, what makes it work is that you actually get broad-based community input into the process, into the program.
Okay. Why don't we just, as Commissioner Hutchinson said, contact Lakewood Park homeowners. The president could serve if they wanted, or appoint someone. Spanish Lakes, Holiday Pines, you got all of them look good. Fort Pierce Farms, Conservation Alliance is the umbrella group. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Very briefly, I agree with all the comments everyone's made. The only suggestion I have is the final 4, a representative from this board, P&Z, and 2 at-larges. Is there any way we could turn those 4 into 5 individual appointments so that each of us have the ability just to appoint one person? Why do we select one board member, one P&Z member, 2 at-large? Why don't we just give each commissioner an opportunity to select one person, appoint him to this committee to serve? What?
I don't.
Mr. Chairman, quite honestly, I don't want to do that.
I don't really want to make an appointment because they're just all this is just setting up the charrette.
Yeah.
So, and we are appointing when we appoint all these other people.
Possibly, but not necessarily. If we're going to have the homeowner groups identify people, there's certain people who have been involved in this from the beginning, and I don't want it to be. I want to be able to appoint that person and be involved in this process. I just want one appointment to an 11-member committee of someone who has been interested and desirous of being involved. I just want the opportunity to have one voice at the table out of 11 to be involved in the process.
Then Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I just like to
Commissioner
have
Coward,
the board.
wouldn't that fall under the at-large community representative?
It may, if I can get you to agree with me. Let's say I have to fall into a majority vote to get an appointment on here, and I'm just trying to get each of us having one appointment. That's all I'm asking.
Let me get back to that statement. I just need to get on the representative of the BOCC and the planning and zoning. Are you talking an actual board member or just a staff member or
It
what?
could be whatever you chose. I just selected, it could be a board member.
Okay, well, I agree with Commissioner Coward. Why can't we just, yeah, that'd be a lot easier. Everybody come up with one if they want to. Commissioner Lewis, you don't have to come up with one.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, these folks are not giving the final decision. They're not, all of our,
Setting up
all the folks we want
Correct.
to talk to can take part in the charrette. So I don't see any reason for someone that will uphold my viewpoint or whatever to be part of this group. I'm just not real clear. We have at large, we have, landowners and all sorts of groups included here. At this point, I'd rather the people that belong to these groups chose who was going to speak for them rather than me deciding who needs to speak for them.
My appointments usually disagree with me anyway, so I'm not sure what.
So do mine, I was just saying.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board? It's just to set up the charrette. I really don't care either way.
I would like to have the ability to just appoint one person. That's my opinion.
Why don't we, how about if the board just agrees to let Commissioner Coward make the appointment on number 8? And I'm not saying that to be silly. If you have somebody that you want to appoint, I think that's fine.
Well, I'll even identify the person,
Sure.
and it's the individual who's been involved, Miss Karen, from the outset. She lives in the area. She's been instrumental in getting community involvement. She's been at both the land use planning meetings.
Who is this?
Miss Karen, I believe is her name.
Yes. And
I haven't even
her first name
personally
escapes
spoken
me.
to her,
Okay.
but she's the perfect candidate.
That's great.
She's been interested and involved, and I want to be able to appoint that person and not have it fall to chance. I think she deserves to be
You all
directly
agree with
involved in
Commissioner
this.
Coward's appointment?
We have some at-large representatives. I have no problem with them choosing one of those.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be...
No, that's
Now, wait a
fine.
minute. You're saying this as a representative of the Board of County Commissioners or as an at-large?
I just want her to be involved in the process.
He wants her on.
That's all I would like.
Well, that's what I tried getting clarified. I thought the process was going to be okay.
Okay, so we have number 11 already appointed, if there's a motion. Seriously.
I'm not voting on that.
I'll vote for it. Do you make the motion?
I can make a motion to do that. I have no problem with Commissioner Coward making one of the at-large community representative appointments.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye. Or
Okay,
no.
so that lady is appointed in seat number 11. So can we approve? Is this okay otherwise, Commissioner Coward? All right. So,
Identify a board member. If this seems odd that one of the board members would serve, but if that's what this group wants to do.
It said
I'm
a
not sure it
representative.
has to
That means we could send staff that's BOCC employed.
Well, that's what I was trying to get in
we'll be there.
earlier.
yeah, we'll probably all be at the charrette anyway, but this is just to set up the charrette. So, okay. Do we need a motion on this, or is this just for information?
I would say the only thing, just your initial appointment there, slot at number 11, and instructions to us to make the contacts, which you've already received.
Okay.
And then we'll try and fill in the rest of the blanks as we go over the next 2 weeks.
That sounds
The
good.
objective is to get this done shortly.
Right, definitely.
And that includes the other at-larges being open to the public. You're going
Yes.
to put something out there. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So we are on Herman's Bay Access. Did we pull that? All right. So we're going to do a little investigation, find out, look into that. General Masters.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
8A. I had asked before we get too far in this, I'd asked to just find out what the caseload is here and what the demands are, and nobody ever got that. I looked at the backup, and it didn't say anything about the caseload. And it sounds like his caseload, this is for appointment of a general master, sounds like the caseload's going to increase in January, which is fine. Sounds like he's got a lot more work, but I just would like to see a printout of the number of cases, and if the salary is comparable to other areas, let's make sure the caseload is comparable to other areas. In other words, what are we getting for our money? Can we do that, or is there a rush to do this today?
The contract, I believe, expired on September 30th, but we can continue it.
You can continue paying the
Sure,
person
the
if
hourly
they agree.
rate and then straighten out later. Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Does anybody object to that? I just.
I don't know. I think that information would be helpful.
Okay, 8B, biweekly committee reports. We can do them or skip them. It's your pleasure.
Can we pass?
Okay. And the only other thing that I had was that you all probably have seen the emails or memos on the lady that wants to bring an absolutely gorgeous tall ship here. Do we have any pictures to put up there? No? I thought we were going to have them, but I guess not. Anyway, we had problems with the last tall ship owner, but that was no problem with the vessel. There was a problem with the owner, it appears. There was some problems, personality and business. There's a new tall ship that wants to come here. It's absolutely gorgeous. I've talked to staff. They indicate we have to go out for an RFP, but yes, sir.
Do we have to go out for RFP, Dan? Every year we go out for an RFP and we don't get responses. I mean,
Well, if we've done that in the past and we haven't gotten responses, then perhaps the board can consider that if it wants to. And just, again, we have tried to get competitive proposals and we haven't been able to. So I think at some point you can use that as a basis for not going out for proposals.
Well, the last guy still wants to be here, so technically we probably ought to have an RFP.
It does have a cleansing effect, and it takes a little bit of time, but it does have a cleansing effect.
But before we cleanse ourselves, I think the lady would like to sail down and begin using it, and we gave that permission to the last guy. So
Right.
can we do that to this lady?
Yes, sir. We can work out a temporary arrangement.
It'd be wonderful to have a tall ship here without all the problems that went with the last one.
Mr. Chairman, my only concern was I believe the reason we gave for declining to continue with the last tall ship was availability to the public of that particular space. Are we giving up that idea altogether?
Well, I think we
kinda
were
like
just
that
being
idea.
polite. I think the truth was the fellow was very hard to deal with and alienated everybody in the community just about and was obnoxious. So that was the honest reason.
I just thought
We should have
making
told him
space.
And didn't pay his bills.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, before you, I'm sorry, were you done?
Not really. I was just
Okay.
thinking that I was just going to say that I kind of like the idea of having space available to the public to dock now that we haven't improved the area and made it a destination.
Yeah, and there's still some dock space available. I think we were just politely
yes, we have
trying-
slips inside the dock.
Always tell the truth when you tell somebody. Just tell him he needs to be a nicer person, or he may not find anywhere to dock his ship anywhere in the country. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before you move to adjourn, I think that's concluded the agenda.
Yes, sir.
At the beginning of the meeting, we passed on 2C because we were going to have a presentation or waiting for those members. I think we have to return back to that.
Yeah, why don't we do that and just ask them to come to the next meeting if they couldn't make this one. They are a good group. I'd hate to miss them. That's the Head Start group and the kids and the leader from Head Start.
Well, we're at Head Start. They were supposed to come today. We don't know why they didn't show up.
Right, but if they want to
the
come,
little kids,
please invite them back. It'll
have to be during a day meeting.
Let's move approval today.
Oh, of the resolution?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to approve item 2C.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. So we'll give them the resolution, but we also would love to have them come back and perform for us. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned.
We'll come to order, St. Lucie County Erosion District. First on the agenda is approval of the minutes of August 26th, September 11th, and September 18th.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next is general public comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to discuss the erosion district? Seeing no one, we'll come back to the board. And is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
Move approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Adjourn.
And I think I'm vice chair of this one. On mosquito control, will come to order as the mosquito control district. Again, first on the agenda is approval of the minutes of October
Move
14th.
approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
General public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Move approval.